You think you know Adolf Hitler? You've never seen him like this before. Hitler's contemporaries, from his birth in Braunau to his death in the bunker, authentically flesh out the picture. Who was Hitler? Hitler neither finished school nor had any vocational training. He occasionally lived in homeless shelters or on the street. He refused to pursue a regular job. To this day, it seems inexplicable that he could come to power. Out of nowhere, Hitler became the Fuehrer, leader of the German Reich, one of the most powerful men of the 20th century, starting an inferno that engulfed the world and brought death to millions of people. The nation worshipped him and followed him blindly into the abyss. But during his lifetime, he kept his origins and his life secret. No one should know how or who he was. Fascinating and oppressive accounts from companions, friends, and enemies, as well as the most extensive collection of archive material ever shown. Much of it, hitherto unpublished, reveal who Hitler was and how he could become what he was: a notorious liar and an unscrupulous murderer. Hitler's power is now unlimited. He is Chancellor and President for life, and Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces. He makes the laws, with Cabinet and Parliament having merely token functions. While portraying himself as a Chancellor of Peace, Hitler works secretly to build up Germany's military power. Young Germans are drilled in paramilitary organizations like the Hitler Youth. The people come to terms with the merciless dictatorship and the persecution of dissidents and minorities. The Nuremberg race laws are passed unanimously by the Reichstag at a special meeting convened at a party rally. After the return of the Saarland to Germany by plebiscite and in violation of the Versailles Treaty, the remilitarization of the Rhineland, the world worries about whether Hitler will make further territorial claims.
Speech in Munich, March the 14th, 1936. With the confidence of a sleepwalker, I am following the path marked out by destiny for me. Adolf Hitler.
I once said to him that the people still stood behind him. But if the corruption, the suppression of free speech, and the silencing of any type of criticism continued, one day the majority of people would refuse to follow. He replied,
"Ach, Wiedemann, I too am merely an instrument of fate and can't always act as I'd like."
And with that, he disappeared. Fritz Wiedemann, adjutant to Adolf Hitler.
Diary, Berlin, August the 1st, 1934. At lunchtime, we drove to the Halensee baths. People are friendly and peaceful. Even the young people seem well behaved here. The Berliner Zeitung newspaper published a bulletin at 8:30 this morning. Condition deteriorating, pulse weaker. So the end is near. This death does not come at a good time. Erich Ebermeier, writer.
Diary, Thursday, August the 2nd, 1934. Around 9 a.m., old Hindenburg fell asleep forever. The German people stand stricken at his deathbed. Hitler was there yesterday. Henriette Schneider, housekeeper, East Prussia.
At the first session of the cabinet following the death of the president, Hitler mentioned his last visit with emotion, which appeared to be genuine. He wanted him to pay particular attention to cultivating a friendship with England. Lutz Graf Schwerin von Kruse, Minister of Finance.
Even now, his death is too soon. Hitler surely won't allow anyone to be above him. The newspaper reports the following about the death of Hindenburg. The government has enacted the following law that is hereby announced. The office will be merged with that of the Chancellor, which means all authority of the President goes to the Fuehrer and Chancellor Adolf Hitler.
Attention there, military history enthusiasts. Brace yourself for an unparalleled journey into the heart of warfare with History Hit, where the untold stories of desperate battles come to life. Join James Holland on a gripping road trip through Italy in Road to Victory, Italy 1943, uncovering the often overlooked campaign of the British 8th Army's landing and advance up the Italian peninsula in 1943. Next, explore the forgotten battlefields of the First World War with Alex Churchill, tracing the bloody battles that unfolded before the trenches, revealing the clash of modern weapons and Napoleonic tactics in a conflict that set the stage for the Great War. And finally, follow the one and only Rishi Sharma in Untold Stories of World War II as he raced against time to capture over 2,200 personal oral histories from living combat veterans, preserving the harrowing accounts of those who lived at the bleeding edge on the front line. Discover hundreds of hours of award-winning documentaries and ad-free podcasts with History Hit. Sign up for a special offer via the link in the description.
Karl Windschild, retired pastor. Wallenstedt diary.
Diary, Friday, August the 3rd, 1934. Hindenburg is to be buried in Tannenberg. Henrietta Schneider.
On the other hand, he repeatedly boasted in public that he was the only statesman without a bank account. He certainly didn't need one, as he had all the money of the party and the state at his command without any supervision. Fritz Wiedemann, until January 1939, personal adjutant to Adolf Hitler.
For Hitler, money and goods had no real meaning. They were vague concepts. Christa Schröder, Hitler's private secretary.
From the middle of the 1920s onwards, Hitler is in constant conflict with the tax authorities because his income as a speaker, the fees for the articles in the Völkischer and Illustrierte Beobachter newspapers, as well as the royalties from the sale of Mein Kampf, are either not properly taxed or not taxed at all. In October 1934, the Munich Tax Office calculates a liability of more than 405,000 Reichsmark. However, the Führer's problem will be solved almost immediately. The Reich Finance Ministry declares that Hitler is no longer obliged to pay taxes due to his constitutional position. As of 1934, Hitler no longer pays taxes. All outstanding taxes are also cancelled.
The tiresome consideration of financial issues was not his thing. Money was as natural as the air he breathed, and since he had never been forced to make any corrections, thanks to the donations of his admirers, he assumed that others had a similarly unencumbered relationship to money. Ernst Hanfstaengl, head of the NSDAP Foreign Press Bureau.
The NSDAP Reich Press Office reports that as Reich Chancellor, the Führer does not receive a salary. He has renounced the remuneration of Reich Chancellor because he has his own income as a writer. Völkischer Beobachter newspaper, front page report, November the 7th, 1933.
As Reich Chancellor, Adolf Hitler is entitled to an annual salary of 29,100 Reichsmarks and an allowance of 18,000 marks. With his appointment as Chancellor, to gain positive publicity, Hitler waives his salary to the benefit of members of the SA and SS killed in action. However, the waiver is only for 1 year, and from 1934 onwards, Hitler receives, without public announcement, his salary along with the remuneration for the office of President, a further 157,000 Reichsmarks. Hitler maintains his publicly Spartan lifestyle in surroundings of not inconsiderable luxury, In addition to his private apartment in Munich, he also has a residence in the Alps on Obersalzberg. Unnoticed by the public, he builds up a fortune worth millions.
I don't have any stocks. I don't own shares in any company. I don't earn dividends. Adolf Hitler in the Kruppworks, Essen, March the 27th, 1936.
He had considerable financial free rein, as there were always considerable amounts on his account at the Franz Eyre publishing house. Heinz Linger, valet to Adolf Hitler.
Although for a head of state and public figure, the right to his own image is limited, Hitler makes sure he is compensated for the use of his likeness on stamps.
The last Post Minister came up with the idea of issuing stamps on national memorial days or other occasions. The considerable proceeds were transferred to a special fund, the Stamp Fund, which Hitler was free to use. Christa Schröder.
Regular postage stamps will in future bear the head of the Fuhrer and be issued at all post and government offices. Official Journal of the Reichspost Ministry, announcement by the German Reichspost.
I myself once saw Reichspost Minister Ohne Sorge bring Hitler a check for 50 million. Heinrich Hoffmann, Reich Commissioner of Photography and friend of Adolf Hitler.
Hitler promises the heads of industry he will eliminate the trade unions. At the suggestion of Gustav Krupp von Bohlen und Halbach, industry shows its gratitude with the Adolf Hitler Fund from German industry, to which the companies pay a percentage of turnover. From the middle of 1933 onwards, up to 100 million Reichsmarks a year are transferred by German industry to Hitler, expressly for his personal and private use. By today's standards, Hitler would have been a billionaire.
Dispatched to the Danish Foreign Ministry, Berlin, August the 4th, 1934. A man has been given power that no human being alive has ever possessed before. All this power is conjoined in one single person, whose life up until now does not give us any reason to believe that the all-encompassing genius who could save Germany has been found. Herluf Zahle, Danish ambassador to Berlin.
He took over command of the German armed forces himself. For one last time, he transferred the command of the army to a general. Friedrich Hossbach, Major, Army Adjutant to Hitler.
Wehrmacht's oath of loyalty to Adolf Hitler. I swear by God this sacred oath that I shall render unconditional obedience to the leader of the German Reich and people, Adolf Hitler, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, and that as a brave soldier, I shall at all times be prepared to give my life for this oath.
As in the days of the Kaiser, this oath does not commit the soldiers of the German army to the nation, but to the ruler himself, the Führer Adolf Hitler.
Diary, Wednesday, October the 17th, 1934. A law has been made. Hitler will remain the leader of the German people for life. Henrietta Schneider. Yesterday we followed the ceremonies on Bückerberg on the radio. Once again Hitler spoke excellently. All over the world, war, strikes, unrest. Here, profound peace. The people know this, or they would not celebrate him so much. Henrietta Schneider.
At the Harvest Festival, I saw Hitler at Buckeberg, near Hamelin, the old Pied Piper town. An immense mass of people surged up the hill. Grandstands had been put up at the foot and the summit. As the motorcade approached down on the plain, the Heils, shouted continuously by thousands upon thousands of voices, came rushing down the hillside like a hurricane. The road was flanked by peasant women from Buckeberg, from the Weserberg land, from Westphalia, all in traditional costume. They pushed forward to try and see him, to shake his hand and look into his blue eyes. He wore a beaming smile, and suddenly there he was in front of me, less than a meter away, looking directly at me for a second. He makes a strong impact, of that there is no doubt. Helmut Rossmann, Berlin correspondent for Swiss newspapers.
I had to think a lot about the comments of an ordinary middle-aged Berlin woman. She said she went to all the ceremonies and stood near the front rows where the Fuhrer walked by. But she was never able to see him, because whenever he came near, her eyes filled with tears. Erich Kort, Department Head, Foreign Ministry.
It is not necessary in a totalitarian dictatorship to be loved by the people. It is enough to be feared, as Stalin was in Soviet Russia. But that Hitler was beloved by the German masses, there could be no doubt. Göring was next in their affection. To them, he was a hail fellow well met. It never seemed to concern them that he was also an unscrupulous killer. William Shirer, correspondent to the Universal News Service to Berlin, the nightmare years.
At the beginning of March 1935, Adolf Hitler travels to Bayreuth to attend the funeral of the district party leader of the Bavarian Ostmark, Hans Schemm, who died after a plane crash. Hitler uses such occasions to demonstrate his attachment to the party's old guard, which supplies almost all the district leaders and the influential Reich leaders of the NSDAP. Hitler does not attend the funeral, but most of the district leaders do. The centre of power of the party, and since he became Chancellor, that of the German Reich, is wherever Adolf Hitler happens to be, and he is always on the move. He keeps official appointments, often in combination with public speeches, and meets local party officials, patrons, and protégés. Officially, Hitler has no private life. There is no distinction made between professional and private travel. The role of ministers is becoming increasingly insignificant in the system of unregulated coexistence of the Führer's rule and many old and new competing centres of power in the party and the state. Between June and December 1933, the cabinet meets 20 times, in 1935 12 times, and in 1937 6 times. The last cabinet meeting is held on February the 5th, 1938.
The magic formula, the Führer has ordered. The Führer wishes. The Führer accepts. The Führer forbids, or the Führer authorizes, became the completely new, legitimized method of authority to issue directives that nullified all existing forms of state life in Germany. Hans Frank, lawyer, Reich legal director.
When tensions and arguments arose between leading party members, Hitler stayed out of it. I often had the feeling that Hitler was amused by this infighting. Although he didn't acknowledge it, he obviously still wanted to prevent the emergence of a united front against his despotism. Christa Schröder.
He was strangely undecided in all these matters. On the outside, Hitler appeared as a really harsh dictator who reacted quickly and brutally. That he hesitated, even almost timidly avoided decisions, seems unbelievable. But it was like that. Albert Speer, the Kranzberg Protocol.
In the summer of 1935, Berlin looked like the cosmopolitan city it had been before 1933. A lot of traffic, advertising, hustle, tourists, and bustling activity. The expulsion of many artists and scientists was not readily apparent. Erich Honecker, communist official in the underground.
Nevertheless, I did not share the judgment of the foreign correspondents who thought that the Germans had light-heartedly resigned themselves to the loss of political freedom or become a single nation of Nazis. Willy Brandt, German-Norwegian refugee in exile in Sweden. Memoirs.
I come to Germany convinced that the overwhelming majority of the people don't find the political system of the Third Reich unjust or harmful. On the contrary, I'm convinced that many millions of people are profiting from Hitler's victory. Above all, unemployed people and everyone whose life is filled with national pride. I'm convinced that the system has indeed taken away certain moral values from people, but in its place has brought material advantages. Antoni Graf-Sobański, Polish writer and essayist.
Diary, Tuesday, January the 15th, 1935. The whole day was taken up with the referendum in the Saarland. Big speeches by the Führer to the Saarlanders, announced by Goebbels. It is an uplifting feeling to experience this great era. Henrietta Schneider.
Nearly 91% of Saarlanders vote freely for the dictatorship in the territorial referendum. And at least 2/3 of earlier members of the two left-wing parties also support the return to Germany.
The majority voted for reunification with the Reich, although since 1933, this Reich had been the Third Reich of the Hitler fascists. Erich Honecker, From My Life.
Gdansk is loosely affiliated with the Republic of Poland as a free city and over 97% inhabited by a German-speaking population. As early as November the 16th, 1933, the NSDAP achieved more than 50% in parliamentary elections. On April the 7th, 1935, more than 59%. Under the supervision of the League of Nations, the elections are free. Outside the territory of the Reich, however, under the supervision of the international community, the overwhelming majority of Germans vote National Socialist, as in 1935 in the Saar area, and in both that year and in 1938 in the semi-autonomous Lithuanian district of Memel.
January the 16th, 1935. I have frequently stated that after the return of the Tsar to Germany, I will make no further territorial demands on France. In historical terms, this is a very difficult thing to renounce, as I am now doing in the name of the German nation. Adolf Hitler.
There will be no more territorial demands on France. But will he someday use weapons to take what he wants? Erich Ebermeier, writer, diary.
Diary, Sunday, March the 16th, 1935. In the evening, we heard a proclamation to the German people by Dr. Goebbels. In answer to the adoption of 2-year military service in France, Hitler has introduced compulsory military service in Germany. Jubilation in Berlin. Henrietta Schneider.
On bicycles, a company of fusiliers of the motorized infantry join maneuvers in Pottenstein, Bavaria, a portent of the kind of warfare that the German army is currently developing for the technology fan Hitler. The war of movement, which in motorized form, Europe will come to know as Blitzkrieg. Hitler is still concealing Germany's rearmament, which contravenes the Versailles Peace Treaty. The Fusiliers' practice ammunition is not live, in contrast to the stick grenades thrown in Franconian Switzerland.
Objective facts also include a number of political acts which, in contrast to the peace declarations, were directed against France. The most important of these acts were the withdrawal from the League of Nations on October 14, 1933, the reintroduction of military service on March 16, 1935, and the occupation of the Rhineland on March 7, 1936. During his regime, he gained a disdainful view of English power and gradually came to the point of no longer activating the former enemy as an ally, but intimidating it by an alternating sequence of friendliness and provocation. Conrad Hayden, Hitler's first biographer, 1936.
Go to breakfast with Lord Baldwin. He talked of Winston Churchill and said he lacked soul. I suggested that Winston is very sympathetic to misfortune in others. He answered, "Oh, I don't deny that Winston has a sentimental side, and what is more, he cannot really tell lies." Harold Nicholson, Member of Parliament, National Labour Party.
I can't lie for myself personally. I will never do that. But if I lie for my country, for Germany, then every lie is justified. Adolf Hitler to Erhard Milch, State Secretary, the Aviation Ministry.
The Fuhrer says, as a private person, I would never break my word. As a politician for Germany, if necessary, 1,000 times. Walter Havel, Ambassador and SS Oberführer, representative of the Foreign Office with the Fuhrer.
Interview with Ward Price, correspondent for the Daily Mail, January the 17th, 1935. I know the horrors of war. No gains can compensate for the losses it brings. I have seen that war is not the highest form of bliss, but the contrary. I have witnessed only the deepest suffering. Hence, I can quite frankly state, Germany will never break the peace of its own accord. Adolf Hitler.
In the evening, Hitler spoke in the Reichstag for over 2 hours about our desire for peace. Henrietta Schneider.
Hitler's speech on disarmament in the Reichstag, May the 21st, 1935. Whoever lights the torch of war in Europe can wish for nothing but chaos. We, however, live in the firm conviction our times will see not the decline, but the renaissance of the West. It is our proud hope and our unshakable belief that Germany can make an imperishable contribution to this great work. Adolf Hitler.
Several times during his 2-hour-long oration, I found myself being carried away by his soaring words, until I would catch myself up and think, it's all false. William Shirer.
In 1937, the world still hopes to live in peace with Adolf Hitler's Germany. In 1935, Britain and Germany had agreed on a naval treaty. Germany is allowed to expand its navy to 35% of British strength. In August 1937, a naval review with German participation takes place in the English port of Portsmouth. Japanese and Italian warships also take part in the parade during the traditional Naval Week alongside Soviet, French and Canadian craft. On September the 17th, 1939, a German submarine will sink the Courageous, the first British aircraft carrier in the English Channel.
I saw a sign on the shop door. Dogs and Jews not allowed. Edgar Voigtvanger.
Diary. Sunday, September the 15th, 1935. On the radio tonight, they're announcing the outcome of today's resolutions in the Reichstag, that is to say, the laws that the NSDAP deputies have agreed on, the anti-Jewish laws. Marriage between Aryans and non-Aryans is forbidden. Karl Windschild, retired pastor.
Ich schlage nun dem Reichstag die Annahme der Gesetze vor, die Ihnen Parteigenosse Reichstagspräsident Göring verlesen wird. Hinter allen drei Gesetzen steht die Partei und mit ihr und hinter ihr die deutsche Nation. Artikel 1. Die Reichsfarben sind schwarz-weiß-rot. Artikel 2. Reichs- und Nationalflagge ist die Hakenkreuzflagge. Reichsbürger ist nur der Staatsangehörige deutschen oder artverwandten Blutes, der durch sein Verhalten beweist, dass er gewillt und geeignet ist, in Treue dem deutschen Volk und Reich zu dienen. Eheschließungen zwischen Juden und Staatsangehörigen deutschen oder artverwandten Blutes sind verboten. Unser Führer, im Retter und Schöpfer, Sieg Heil! Sieg Heil! Sieg Heil!
It is absolutely normal that in seaside resorts and small towns, both in northern Germany and Bavaria, signs have been put up at the town limits forbidding non-Aryans from visiting. Herr Luftsaale.
Summer holiday anti-Semitism is the ironic term for the widespread exclusion of and discrimination against guests of Jewish descent and religion in German seaside resorts and spas that was already taking place before 1933. After the seizure of power, the National Socialists are able to connect directly with the anti-Jewish attitude of many resort managements and hoteliers. In 1935, Jewish tourists are completely excluded from the beaches of the German North and Baltic Seas. A corresponding decree from the Reich Ministry of the Interior in July 1937 is thus superfluous.
Diary, Berlin, December the 10th, 1935. The Genetic Health Act, or sterilization law, has been passed and envisages extensive examinations and tests for engaged couples before they get married. If things continue like this, we'll soon have a race of supermen. So far, there is no sign of this happening. Erich Ebermeier. Journal d'Allemagne, December the 24th, 1935. Christmas. The regime pales anew. The old Germany of piety and forests is created once again in every home. Once again, homely life is diffused by the fresh scent of pines. Silent night, O holy night of coziness, thanks to which once again I feel the heartbeat of my old beloved Germania. Denis de Rougemont, Swiss, lecturer in French.
Diary, Sunday, March the 7th, 1936. At 12 o'clock, the Fuhrer gave the heralded speech. Hitler has occupied the demilitarized zone in the west. The Reichstag is dissolved. New elections are on March the 29th. Henrietta Schneider.
Hitler himself once declared in my presence, if the French had marched into Germany at that time, as I thought it possible in those 24 hours, then I would have had to withdraw again in shame and disgrace. Paul Otto Schmidt, Chief Interpreter at the Foreign Ministry, experiences.
Well, France has stood idly by. It is one of the biggest moral and intellectual collapses in its history. Paul Reynaud, conservative French politician, Memoirs.
Diary, Monday, March the 30th, 1936. The election results were really good. 98.95%, a record. Lotte picked up Lore. Henrietta Schneider.
The party governor of Cologne had the right to hit 103% when adding up the yes votes. When the result became known in the Reich Chancellery in the late evening, it was greeted with laughter. Nothing more. Fritz Wiedemann, adjutant to Adolf Hitler.
Letter, April the 16th, 1936. My dear Fuehrer, warm congratulations on your birthday. I wish you all the best. But just think, we're always having to write essays about you. This causes our love for you to suffer. And you are much too important for that. Please issue an order for our teachers to choose other topics. Sieg Heil, yours, Mary D., member of the Young Girls League, Bad Homburg.
A single line of SS men separated him from the crowd. I was in the first row. A good shot could have picked him off, but in 100 similar situations, these good shots never materialized. That's the most important thing that I know about Hitler. You can only fantasize about that. Denis de Rougemont.
Speech at the Nuremberg Party Rally 1936. Not every one of you can see me, and I cannot see every one of you, but I feel you, and you feel me. It is the belief in our nation that has made us little people great. You come here from your daily struggle for existence and our struggle for Germany in order to gain the feeling. Now we are together. We are with him, and he with us. And we are now Germany. Adolf Hitler.
One day, a few boys from the Hitler Youth came to our school playground promoting their group. We thought they were chic. They wore smart shirts with ties, told us about sports events and contests. That really impressed me. We did gymnastics and exercises, and took part in scouting games. As a good gymnast, they made me into a type of demonstrator. A scout leader of the League of German Girls in the Hitler Youth. At the time, in 1934, I was proud, naturally. Beate Uhse, pilot.
The only big Nazi who actively did sports was Reinhard Heydrich. He rode, fenced, flew, and sailed. He excelled in everything. He always looked impressive as an athlete and was always fair and popular. As soon as he put on his fencing gear, he was no longer head of the Gestapo. He was just an athlete. He actually did what Goering, Goebbels, Rosenberg, and Lai only sanctimoniously described or demanded. Heinz Linger, valet to Adolf Hitler.
With his disdain for all things related to the body, sports, which at the time were becoming more popular, also meant very little to him. Somewhere I can remember reading how the young Hitler daringly swam across the Danube. I can't remember it myself. August Kubitschek, childhood friend.
Lunch was spent mostly telling jokes, which made the boss laugh heartily. He made some personal comments and remarked that he had once been a good skier, but that he had given it up as he came more and more into the public eye. As the Fuehrer, one should only be active in areas one has a sound knowledge of, because otherwise the begrudgers would use any small mishap as an opportunity to spread slander. Henry Picker, Senior Executive Officer, Table Talk at the Wolfschanzer Führer Headquarters.
Due to yesterday's snowfall, the Führer broached the subject of skiing. He scoffed at this healthy sport, which from a certain time of year onwards filled all the hospitals in Munich. Skiing had already caused so many injuries among members of the party leadership that he had reason to doubt the practical aspects of the sport. Werner Körpen, Adjutant to Reich Minister Alfred Rosenberg, report from the Wolfschanzer Führer headquarters.
One noticeable symptom of Hitler's disturbed relationship with the environment was his terrible fear of water. The fact that Hitler couldn't swim and doggedly refused to learn, or at least visit a swimming pool, was undoubtedly due to his strange hydrophobia. Ernst Hanfstengel.
He took daily baths. Yes, after every speech that he gave, he took a hot bath. In contrast, he didn't like bathing in public. Wilhelm Krause, personal assistant to Hitler from 1933 to 1939.
Hitler was particularly shy of being seen without clothes. He believed that if anyone saw him in a bathing suit and photographs were taken, he would lose the respect of the people. Heinrich Hoffmann, photographer.
He didn't want the old saying, "There is no such thing as a great man in the eyes of his personal servant," applied to him. Christa Schröder, Hitler's private secretary.
Later, Dr. Morell told me in confidence that Hitler was a difficult patient. You couldn't persuade him to allow an X-ray to be taken. When he gave him an injection, only the part of his body necessary was exposed to allow it. His servant, meanwhile, was ordered to leave the room. Heinrich Hoffmann.
The Germans have only taken to sport during the last 30 years, but they are keen and capable performers. They learnt most of their sport from us. Football is the most popular game, but is played less vigorously than in Britain. Charging is regarded as rough play. Football is entirely amateur, and pools are unknown. There is no cricket, but plenty of athletics, some tennis, and a little golf. Boxing and wrestling are both popular spectacles, and the Germans go in for a good deal of cycle racing. Instructions for British servicemen in Germany, 1944.
In August 1936, the 11th Olympic Games of the modern era are held in Berlin.
Like millions of other Germans, I was also convinced after Hitler's rise to power that Adolf the Bounteous, as he was mockingly called, really would bring better times. At the Olympic Games in Berlin, he demonstrated Germany's sporting greatness to the world. I also allowed myself to be blinded, like millions of others. Beate Uhse.
Diary, July the 23rd, 1936. Our streets have changed for the better recently. The Stürmer newspaper display cases have been removed so that visitors to the Olympic Games do not feel offended by these agitating papers. Bella Fromm, German Jewish journalist.
In the summer, Hitler's fame reached a peak. Everyone wanted to get to know this extraordinary man or to have seen him. Paul Stellin, Air Force attaché in the French embassy in Berlin.
Diary, Berlin, August the 6th, 1936. Mrs. Gussie Jannings invited me to her box at the Olympic Stadium today. The impression was really overwhelming. It would be foolish to deny it. There is a huge round of 100,000 people filled to the last seat. The Fuehrer was already there with his entourage as we took our places. I could observe him well from the side, and frankly, he is more interesting to me than the athletes below on the field. The remarkable thing about Hitler is his cheerful calm, the confident composure of the fortunate and successful that now emanates from him. About 7 o'clock, he gets up. The Führer and Reich Chancellor is leaving the Olympic Stadium, booms from the loudspeakers. Everyone rises to give the Nazi salute. Hitler gives brief thanks. Erich Ebermeier.
Diary, August the 15th, 1936. The lack of sportsmanship from the first man of Germany makes an unpleasant impression. He acted like an insane person, jumping up from his seat and screaming in triumph when the swastika flag was raised, or when the Japanese or Finns won medals. The winners from other countries left him cold. It even seemed he was insulted by their victories over the Nordic competitors. Bella Fromm.
Hans Frank remembers Hitler being highly charged and following the Olympics with passionate interest. In the end, the German team wins 33 gold, 26 silver and 30 bronze medals. First place in the national standings, ahead of the Americans.
These Olympics are a great breakthrough. You can be proud of Germany again. The top country in sports. It's wonderful. Josef Goebbels, Propaganda Minister, Diary.
Report to the Direction Politique et Commerciale Europe, Berlin, August the 18th, 1936. Marked by many German victories, the Olympic Games brought about an extraordinary glorification of national sentiment, and at the same time strengthened the country's admiration of and bond with the Führer. André-François Poncet, French ambassador to Berlin.
The Polish ambassador, Józef Lipski, said, "We need to guard against the people that organizes itself this way. A mobilization in Germany will go just as smoothly." The word went around. Scarcely were the last guests gone when Berlin returned to its old ways. The Stürmer newspapers were hanging in the kiosks again. Max Schmeling, heavyweight boxer.
Windhoek, the largest city in former German southwest Africa, in a colour film of the Reich Colonial League. Since 1920, the former German colony has been governed by the Union of South Africa, mandated by the League of Nations. The overwhelming majority of the approximately 20,000 inhabitants of German origin sympathise with National Socialism and make this clear before the outbreak of war. With the end of the Olympic Games, Hitler's Germany has gained considerable prestige in the world. The NSDAP gathers its party members living outside the German Reich in a special organisation, the NSDAP Overseas Organization, which early on is given the status of a 43rd party district. The Volksdeutsche, or ethnic Germans outside the Reich, are looked after by an ethnic league for German culture abroad, which is controlled by the party.
Diary, December the 24th, 1936. After we opened our presents, Lotte played the piano and the others sang. Then we listened to Hess deliver his message to Germans abroad. Henriette Schneider.
In dieser Gemeinschaft gedenken wir heute am Heiligen Abend ganz besonders herzlich all der Deutschen, die auf schweren Posten draußen für Deutschland stehen und ihre schwere Pflicht für Deutschland erfüllen. Und wir gedenken all derer, die in zäher Verbissenheit draußen zur neuen Fahne standen und stehen, auch wenn eine böswillige oder unverständige Umwelt sie dafür hart anpackte. Das große, neu erstandene Deutschland wünscht all seinen Kindern draußen und in der Heimat ein inhaltsreiches und glückliches neues Jahr. Wir können das Fest der Deutschen nicht vorübergehen lassen, ohne in tiefster Dankbarkeit des Mannes zu gedenken, der das neue Deutschland, das Deutschland unserer Liebe, unserer Hoffnung und unseres Stolzes werden ließ. Des Mannes, der mit einer Hingabe sondergleichen über diesem Deutschland und über dem Wohl und Wehe seiner Kinder herinnen und draußen wacht, dessen Leben aufgeht in der Sorge um Deutschland.
Thanks to Germany's economic recovery, Hitler gains in popularity among those who are not members of the NSDAP or a Nazi organization. He intensifies the construction of the new Autobahn motorways and promises the Germans an affordable car, the Volkswagen, also known as the Beetle, for which an entire new industrial centre is created. The Nuremberg party rallies advanced to become bombastic shows of Hitler's power and part of the general demonstration of reinvigorating German military strength. His private life is confidential. Thus, he can keep his relationship with Eva Braun secret, as he has always cultivated an image of living alone for the good of Germany.
History is replete with examples of men who have risen to power by employing stern, grim, wicked, and even frightful methods, but who, nevertheless, when their life is revealed as a whole, have been regarded as great figures whose lives have enriched the story of mankind. So may be the case with Hitler. Winston Churchill. Great Contemporaries, 1938.
The Germans adore military show. In Nazi Germany, everyone has a uniform. If it isn't the uniform of the Army, Navy or Air Force, it is that of the SA, SS or some party organization. Even the little boys and girls have been strutting about in the uniform of the Hitler Youth or the Union of German Girls. Instructions for British Servicemen in Germany, 1944.
The Nuremberg Rally of Work takes place in September 1937. After the seizure of power, there will be 6 further party congresses, each with a motto. The Nuremberg Rally of Peace is scheduled for September the 2nd, 1939, and is cancelled 1 day beforehand because of the Wehrmacht's invasion of Poland.
Before the end of Culture Week, I was once again in an aeroplane. And even from the air, I could see the mass of people inside the party buildings on Zeppelinfeld. On the way back from the airport, the boiling heat of this uniformed public festival suddenly enveloped me. Marching music, columns of men, swirling dust, swastika flags in all possible and impossible places, and the pavements brown with people. Paul Otto Schmidt, chief interpreter at the Foreign Ministry, experiences.
It's impossible to describe the unique intoxication that moves the hundreds of thousands of men and women. For 8 days, the city of Nuremberg is under a spell. André-François Poncet, French ambassador to Berlin.
I confess that I was exceptionally impressed by much of what I saw. And I was fascinated by the brilliantly smooth running of events. Albert Kesselring, Supreme Commander, Air Fleet 1.
Each time I noticed how enchanted people looked, their faces full of near-biblical devotion when they saw Hitler. As if delirious, they stretched out their arms and greeted him with screams and shouts of Heil. Paul Otto Schmidt.
The march past took 4 hours. He held his right arm out in the Nazi salute for literally the entire time. Afterwards, I asked him how he was able to do that. His answer? Willpower. Neville Henderson, British ambassador to Germany.
He couldn't do it like Comrade Esser, who didn't seem to get tired with his arm outstretched for hours and hours. Hitler was almost envious of his stamina. Then he noticed how Esser quietly put his right arm down and raised his left. As Hitler told us later, he would have liked to have copied Esser. Fritz Wiedemann, adjutant to Adolf Hitler.
Over the years, the procedures at the Nuremberg rallies are canonized. The form, as Hitler expresses to Albert Speer in a debriefing of the party convention in 1938, must be an irreversible ritual for as long as he lives. Canonization would provide his potential successor with Hitler's borrowed charisma and become a liturgy of the Third Reich.
But in Nuremberg, I also had the distinct feeling of imminent danger. The conversion of the German people to National Socialism was honest and complete. Besides the Fuhrer's cheering masses, who seemed prepared to follow him and only him, whatever opposition that remained consisted merely of plans and the desire to oppose, without any backing or force. Paul Stellin, Air Force attaché in the French Embassy in Berlin.
William Lyon Mackenzie King, Premier Minister of Canada. Diary, June the 29th, 1937. After received in audience at Reich's Chancellery. When I was formally shown into the room in which Herr Hitler received me, he was facing the door as I went in. He was wearing evening dress. Quietly and pleasantly said he was pleased to see me in Germany. His face is much more prepossessing than his pictures would give the impression of. It is not that of a fiery, overstrained nature, but of a calm, passive man, deeply and thoughtfully in earnest. His skin was smooth. His face did not represent lines of fatigue and weariness. His eyes impressed me most of all. There was a liquid quality about them which indicate keen perception and profound sympathy. He looked most direct at me in our talks together at the time, save when he was speaking at length on any one subject. He then sat quite composed and spoke straight ahead, not hesitating for a word, perfectly frankly, looking down occasionally towards the translator and occasionally towards myself. He went on to say, so far as war is concerned, you need have no fear of war at the instance of Germany. We have no desire for war. Our people don't want war, and we don't want war. As I talked with him, I could not but think of Joan of Arc. He is distinctly a mystic. He is a teetotaler and also a vegetarian, abstemist in all his habits and ways.
Mussolini met Adolf Hitler for the first time in Venice in 1934. Hitler was taking his first steps in international politics, while the Duce had been in power for 12 years. The first impression my husband had of Hitler was not overwhelming. Rachela Mussolini, wife of Benito Mussolini, Memoirs.
He was like a gramophone that only plays 7 notes, and once played, starts all over again. Benito Mussolini.
After the meeting in Venice, the relationship between Hitler and Mussolini initially remained distant.
Diary, August the 4th, 1937. Wednesday, Pisa. We picked up a German boy by the name of Martin on the way to Pisa. Very interesting, as he was definitely anti-Hitler. Although he couldn't tell us much about it. He also told us how very much the Germans hate the Russians. It looks like the next war will come from that direction, especially as England and the rest of Europe seem to be drawing away from Russia. John F. Kennedy, student traveling in Europe.
Diary, September the 6th, 1937. The Duce held forth on America, an element of cultural decomposition. He's planning to write a book, Europe in the year 2000. The races that will play an important role are the Italians, the Germans, the Russians, and the Japanese. The others will be devoured and destroyed by the acid of Jewish corruption. They even refuse to father children because it causes pain. They do not know that pain is the only creative element in people's lives. Galeazzo Ciano, Foreign Minister of the Kingdom of Italy, Benito Mussolini's son-in-law.
Diary, August the 17th, 1937. Arrived in Munich around 8 and went to the Hofbräuhaus, which was very interesting. Hitler seems so popular here as Mussolini was in Italy. John F. Kennedy.
The Munich traveller's father, the multi-millionaire Joseph Kennedy, holds the prestigious post of ambassador to London. He is close to Hitler-friendly circles of the British aristocracy, and thus isolated from Washington and London. In 1940, he will resign.
Diary, August the 18th, 1937. Munich. Got up late and none too spry. Had to talk to the proprietor, who is quite a Hitler fan. There is no doubt about it that these dictators are more popular in the country than outside, due to their effective propaganda. John F. Kennedy.
At first, what surprised me was that most Germans, as far as I could see, didn't seem to mind that their personal freedoms had been taken away, that so much of their splendid culture was being destroyed, or soon became aware, to be sure, that in the background there lurked the terror of the Gestapo and the fear of the concentration camps. The vast majority did not seem unduly concerned with what had happened to a few communist, socialist, pacifists, defiant priests and pastors, and to the Jews. William Shirer, correspondent to the Universal News Service in Berlin.
Departure for Cologne via Frankfurt. All towns are very attractive, showing that the Nordic races certainly seem superior to Latins. The Germans really are too good. John F. Kennedy.
During one of these walks, the Fuhrer spoke in depth about traffic problems throughout the world and asserted that, as a result of the development of the automobile and increased production, roads would no longer be able to handle the traffic within the next 10 years. Within 50 years, the horse would be a showpiece of the army at best, or else be on display in a zoo or circus, to be gazed at as camels and elephants are now. Gerhard Engel, army adjutant to Hitler, memoirs in diary form.
He considered horses to be particularly stupid animals, for example, because they shy when they see paper blow in the wind and could thus ruin an entire parade. He was fascinated by engines. He could talk about Autobahns and Volkswagens for hours. Reinhard Spitzi, diplomat and personal assistant to Joachim von Ribbentrop.
Between 1933 and 1938, Hitler is constantly on the move with his large entourage. For this purpose, he has a motorcade, 3 planes, and a special train with 2 carriages at his disposal.
Hitler's favorite vehicle when traveling was the car. Second came the train. Third, but only to save time, was the airplane. The motorcade consisted mostly of 4 to 6 cars, except for official journeys, when there were often more. The first car was the Führer's, then the SS escort, adjutant cars, and the last had the luggage. The motorcade consisted exclusively of Mercedes, because Hitler didn't like it when there was a different make of car in the motorcade. Wilhelm Krause, personal assistant to Hitler.
On my return to the Führer's headquarters yesterday, I flew very fast in the Führer's plane, a very spacious Fokker-Wulf. By the way, this plane is simply furnished, without any ostentation. The only special feature is a desk for Hitler at his seat. Henry Picker, Senior Executive Officer.
On May the 19th, 1935, Hitler's former bodyguard Sepp Dietrich, now commander of the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, ceremoniously opens the Frankfurt am Main-Darmstadt motorway. As early as May 1933, Hitler, who is fascinated by cars and technology, issued a program of motorway construction, which was to create a dense network of 4-lane roads across Germany. Under the responsibility of the General Inspector for German Roads, Fritz Todt, there are about 1,500 kilometers of motorway under construction in autumn 1934. This is also designed to reduce unemployment. In 1936, around 120,000 workers are employed on the project.
One of Hitler's positive achievements was to build hundreds of miles of first-class motor roads, though his object in doing so was largely military. These are called Autobahnen, carways. Instructions for British servicemen in Germany, 1944.
From there, headed for Utrecht on one of the new autostradas. That are the finest roads in the world. Really unnecessary though in Germany, as the traffic is so small. But it would be great in the US, as the speed is unlimited. John F. Kennedy.
Some pre-production KDF cars at the Leipzig Spring Fair of 1936. In February 1934, Hitler had publicly demanded that the German automobile industry develop an economical and inexpensive passenger car, a Volkswagen. In June, Ferdinand Porsche was given the go-ahead by the Reich Association of the German Automotive Industry to develop a prototype. Later, the German Labour Front, with its organisation KDF, or Kraft durch Freude, Strength Through Joy, takes over the management and financing of the project. On May the 26th, 1938, near Brunswick on the Mittelland Canal, the foundations for a Volkswagen plant are laid. Shortly thereafter, a new conurbation called the City of the KDF Car at Fallersleben, later Wolfsburg, is founded. In the KDF city, no private cars will be produced. But from 1938, the military version of the Beetle, the so-called Kübelwagen, and other military equipment. The rest is propaganda, which even has an effect in faraway America.
In a short time, der Fuhrer is going to plaster his great sweeps of smooth motor highways with thousands and thousands of shiny little beetles, purring along from the Baltic to Switzerland and from Poland to France, with father, mother and up to 3 kids packed inside and seeing their fatherland for the first time through their own windshield. New York Times, July the 3rd, 1938.
The Fuhrer then talked about the need to build a highway to Trondheim in Norway, and another to the Crimea. After the war, German citizens with their Volkswagens should have the opportunity to see the conquered territories for themselves. Werner Köppen, Adjutant to Reich Minister Alfred Rosenberg.
Diary, September the 23rd, 1937. The preparations for the trip to Germany are complete. I personally took care of the details. Galeazzucciano.
The Brandenburg Gate and the Pariser Platz had been transformed into a real theatre set by Benno von Arendt. When we turned into Wilhelmstrasse, I had the impression that I was an actor in a gigantic opera performance. Banner flags hung from the roof down to the ground floor on both sides of the front of the buildings. Paul Otto Schmidt.
Hitler had a close friendship with Mussolini almost to the end. He felt a close bond with him through the great similarities of their destinies. Christa Schröder, Hitler's private secretary.
Diary, Berlin, October the 2nd, 1937. It was inherently a law of its own. The law governing special holidays for the state capital Berlin and the movement capital of Munich. It was determined that September the 2nd would be a holiday for Munich, and September the 28th for Berlin. Thus motivated, millions poured into the streets. Erich Ebermeier, writer.
Diary, September the 28th, 1937. The German people are tired of standing for hours to catch a short glimpse of any notable personality. The surging throngs of people were primarily SA men in civvies. Bella Fromm, German Jewish journalist.
The Duce called me.
It's unimaginable what I saw here. The German people are of an exceptional type. With these trumps in his hand, Hitler can risk everything.
Rachela Mussolini, wife of Benito Mussolini.
Diary, Wednesday, September the 29th, 1937. Yesterday we heard very good speeches by the Führer and Il Duce in Berlin. I feel really queasy again. Henrietta Schneider, East Prussia, housekeeper.
I liked the new cult. It stood for flags, shiny police horses, gloriously colourful uniforms, torches and music. Everything for free without having to bother my dad to take me to the puppet show. Thomas Geffer, German Jew, prisoner in Buchenwald.
Hitler's name stands for the achievements and successes of the regime in the mid-1930s. According to the propaganda, and this is what the majority of the population believes, within 3 years his genius has achieved a booming economy, the elimination of unemployment, and the restoration of peace and order. Hitler has suspended the Treaty of Versailles and made Germany a military force to be reckoned with. Every patriotic German recognizes these achievements. Hitler is also gaining in popularity among sections of the population that were once critical of National Socialism. Those convinced by the impression of the visible accomplishment of Hitler's politics or still retaining a certain skepticism do not become National Socialists. They become Fuehrer believers. This accounts for probably more than 90% of all Germans after the victory over France in the summer of 1940, the height of the Führer's credibility.
Diary, Kampen, Sylt, August the 18th, 1937. Frau Tiedemann has made her peace with the Third Reich. And she's right. You're not obliged, as a hostess, to have a worldview. She rented one of her houses in the dunes to Göring last year. Erich Ebermeier.
Hitler seemed modest, middle class, rather dull and self-conscious, yet with a strange tenderness and appealing helplessness. Martha Dodd, daughter of U.S. Ambassador William Dodd.
In private, and we as personal bodyguards belonged to his private life, he was uncomplicated. Rohush Mish, SS Bodyguard Regiment.
Albert Speer, the Kranzberg Protocols. Simple lower middle class life was not hard for him. It attracted a lot of empathy. It gave him a lot of credit for other, unpopular decisions. Otherwise, his simple manner also had clear political intentions. He often emphasized,
if I'm simple and unpretentious, then my surroundings have to be pompous. That way, my simplicity appears even stronger.
This week, our city celebrated German Art Day. Young girls dressed as Vestal Virgins scattered flower petals in the wind. Youths dressed as Roman citizens and wearing sandals like the ancient Romans marched in the balmy warmth of the beginning summer. Edgar Feuchtwanger, German Jewish neighbour of the Adolf Hitler.
With a lot of work and very good taste, Munich artists had decorated the streets through which the procession moved. In Nymphenburg, there was a Night of the Amazons. Cloth balloons transformed the scene into a fairy-like Midsummer Night's Dream. Leni Riefenstahl, director and actress.
The position of Hitler and the National Socialists on sexuality is contradictory. They value morals and discipline, but are not bourgeois. They have no objections to healthy sensuality, especially when it provides genetically healthy offspring.
After a year of Puritanism, the Nazis went to the other extreme. In later years, nudism was so commonplace that a ballet girl who refused to go along with it was soon out of a job. Fridolin Wagner, granddaughter of Richard Wagner.
He condemned the elegant passions of his lofty colleagues, like hunting or horse racing. These were the last remnants of the feudal rule of the princes. He made fun of them a lot. Albert Speer.
Berlin, November 1937. In November, the hunting exhibition was opened by Reich Master Hunter Göring. Strong foreign participation contributed to its success. causing a sensation in Berlin and impressing the visiting guests from all over the world. Our French countrymen came in droves. Paul Stalin.
It has been suggested many times that Hitler had unwavering faith in his old comrades. As far as the Reichsmarschall was concerned, this assumption is true, unfortunately. Heinz Guderian, commander of the 2nd Tank Division.
Goering, who'd become fat and out of shape, seemed ridiculous in his fantasy uniforms and his love of medals and decorations. His greed for earthly goods turned him into a crook. Robert Coulondre, who served as an ambassador to Berlin in autumn 1938, wrote that of all Hitler's sinister buddies, he was still the best. Paul Stalin.
For the rest of the evening, he told jokes about Goebbels and Goering.
Do you know the difference between Goebbels and Goering?
He asked, and when nobody could answer, he solved the riddle himself.
Goebbels is the maximum amount of nonsense a man can utter in 1 hour, and Goering is the maximum amount of sheet metal a man can hang on his chest.
Fridolin Wagner.
On October the 18th, 1936, Adolf Hitler issues the Order to Implement the Four-Year Plan. Headed by Goering as commissioner of the Four-Year Plan, it aims to make Germany self-sufficient and ready for war at short notice.
The power of attorney for the four-year plan was the most extensive concessionary power ever granted in Germany, and all later authorizations actually came from that first power of attorney. Even Goebbels, as the organizer of total war, was subordinate to me. Hermann Göring, conversation with Hermann Bross, Nuremberg, 1945.
The Germans have, of course, many good qualities. They are very hard-working and thorough. They are obedient and have a great love of tidiness and order. Instructions for British servicemen in Germany, 1944.
The international port of Bremen. Despite the efforts to achieve self-sufficiency, the recovery of the economy has also stimulated foreign trade. From 1937, the commissioner for the four-year plan, Hermann Göring, creates the third largest German industrial group with his own Hermann Göring Reichsworks.
Most people were in work again, although wages and salaries were modest, considering the long working hours. The mood in broad sections of the population was not exuberant, but not hostile to the regime either. Even many workers who used to vote for the left were impressed by the extent of the success. Willy Brandt, Social Democrat in exile, later German Chancellor.
The German workers, like the Roman proletariat, were provided by the enterprising Dr. Ley with circuses to divert their attention from the lack of freedom and the scarcity of bread. Within the labor front, Ley created a gigantic organization called Kraft durch Freude, Strength Through Joy, which provided the German worker with fun and games for his leisure at bargain rates. It offered, for instance, dirt-cheap vacation trips on land and sea. Dr. Ley built 2 cruise ships and chartered 10 others to handle ocean cruises for Kraft durch Freude. They were amazingly inexpensive. William L. Shirer, journalist, The Nightmare Years.
At the end of the Weimar Republic, the average number of paid days holiday for workers and employees was 12 working days, with Saturday being a working day. The National Socialists extended the holidays to 3 weeks a year, without a legal framework, but it was mostly only older workers with more than 25 years' service who got so much leave that they could actually travel anywhere.
Germany Report of the Social Democratic Party, March the 12th, 1938. In the Third Reich, it is the armaments that supply the bread, while the circuses are provided by the KDF organization. In the factories, which pay very well, KDF travel fever is particularly strong. Foreign travel is especially popular. Many spend their holidays exclusively with KDF and go on both summer and winter trips.
Letter, March the 20th, 1936. To the Fuehrer and Chancellor of Germany in Berlin. As a former member of the SPD, the undersigned has followed your policies, but could not at first understand that all German national groups you came in contact with were enthusiastic about both your program and your person. Until through your actions, after the seizure of power, it became clear that the unfaltering will to fundamentally transform conditions in Germany filled a decent, honourable person with pleasure, being able to live as a German in Germany. The elimination of all parties and interest groups was itself an act of greatness. I would like to express my gratitude for this if you are interested in the thanks of a simple man. Heil, mein Führer, Adolf Hitler. Signed, Wilhelm E., Trumpet at Meurs, Rhine.
1 in 4 households in Germany still have no electricity. At the same time, long-range missiles are being developed in Peenemünde, aircraft for transatlantic passenger traffic built in Bremen, and experiments with jet engines undertaken in Augsburg.
Hitler was not interested in agriculture at all, apart from the Reich Farmers' Day at Bükeberg. Fritz Wiedemann, adjutant of the NSDAP to Adolf Hitler.
In Hitler's worldview, the peasantry is one of the backbones of the nation. National Socialism propagates a self-sufficient food supply in Germany. In order to facilitate the identification of the rural population with the new regime, in 1933 the National Socialist government declares the Thanksgiving Harvest Festival, which is based on Christian or even older religious rituals, the day of the nourishment trade, an official holiday, like May the 1st for industrial workers. The number of farm workers declines by 16% between 1933 and 1938 as the rural exodus intensifies. Neither coercion nor propaganda can reduce this drain on labour. Nor can modern technology remedy the situation. What little foreign currency there is needed for tanks, cannons and planes, not tractors and harvesters. Agricultural production threatens to decline. In September 1933, a heritage law for farms comes into force, which expresses the National Socialist ideology of blood and soil. The peasantry is considered the source of life of the Nordic race. The law is intended to prevent excessive debts and fragmentation in the succession regarding farms of up to 125 hectares. Hereditary farms only go to a single heir. The excluded heirs are given modest compensation. Nearly 40% of agricultural land is affected. In rural areas of northern and eastern Germany, As well as in parts of Bavaria, peat is used for heating. Oil deposits in Germany are low. Despite all the coal in the Ruhr area, Upper Silesia and the Saarland, and the lignite in the Rhineland and central Germany, the German Reich is a country poor in raw materials. German oil production only covers about 30% of domestic demand. In order to save foreign currency, benzene to the tune of 45% is added to petroleum gasoline from the coking plants of the mining industry, and 10% alcohol from the distilleries.
Hitler's evil spirit was Goebbels. Ernst Hanfstengel, head of the NSDAP Foreign Press Bureau.
On the same evening, I saw Goebbels for the first time. A small man with an overly big head on a child's body. He was surprisingly ugly. His defect, he has a club foot, barely lessened the antipathy that he aroused. He was, however, very intelligent, and after Hitler, the best public speaker in the party. Paul Stalin.
I couldn't care less what people think, and I'll say this openly. Goebbels was an interesting man. I never disliked him. He was only dangerous towards the end. Sarah Leander, Swedish singer and actress.
He was capable of recognizing the faults and weaknesses of the National Socialist system. But he wasn't courageous enough to point these out to Hitler. In front of Hitler, he was like Göring and Himmler, a little man. Heinz Guderian, Major General.
Hitler's private apartment.
The decor was lower middle class. Richly carved, solid oak furniture in the study, books behind glass doors, embroidered pillows with homely inscriptions or vigorous party wishes. On the walls hung idyllic paintings of the Munich school. It smelled of old cooking oil and rancid rubbish. Albert Speer, Spandau Diaries.
The only decoration in the room was a portrait in oil of the Fuhrer's mother, painted from an old photograph. Friedland Wagner.
He's really very lonely. Doesn't have any luck with women. He's too soft with them. Women don't like that. They need a man to lord it over them. Joseph Goebbels.
In October 1938, Willy Forst shoots Bel Ami in the IFA studios in Berlin.
Speech to the Nazi Women's League in Nuremberg. There was a time when liberalism fought for the equal rights of women, but the faces of German women, of German girls, lacked hope. They were gloomy and sad. And today we see countless beaming, laughing faces.
Adolf Hitler.
He knew that he could have any number of women. He refused because he didn't know, as he said jokingly, whether they favored him as a Reich Chancellor or as Adolf Hitler. Albert Speer.
One evening in 1929, Heinrich Hoffmann came to his photo studio accompanied by a man. The stranger introduced himself as Herr Wolf. After he left, Eva Braun wanted to know who the stranger was. Hoffmann declared that he was the Führer of the NSDAP, Adolf Hitler.
Eva didn't come across as an archetypal German girl. Rohush Mish, SS Bodyguard Regiment.
He didn't want clever women near him. Albert Speer.
Privately, Hitler was very nice. Eva Braun loved him very much, and he loved her. Hertha Schneider, friend of Eva Braun.
Hitler had got used to his girlfriend's character, but he didn't give in to everything she wanted. She was subject to a lot of strict rules. When she danced, she did so secretly because Hitler disliked dancing. Christa Schröder.
The efforts my wife and I made to encourage Hitler to take private dancing lessons weren't crowned with success.
No.
He said categorically.
For a statesman, dancing is an undignified activity. All of these balls are purely a waste of time. And besides, the waltz is far too effeminate for a man. It's exactly this waltz mania that made me hate Vienna so much, and how it contributed to the downfall of the Habsburg Empire.
Ernst Hanfstengel, from 1937 in exile.
She had an extremely beautiful figure and was well proportioned. Gertraud Traudel-Junge, Hitler's private secretary from 1942.
According to my observations, sexual relations between Hitler and Eva Braun were sporadically very active. I don't know who was the more active of the two. Eva Braun came across as very sexy, but Hitler too. Heinz Linger, valet to Adolf Hitler.
I never observed any intimacy between Hitler and Eva. Neither did my comrades. Rohush Mish.
Diary, November the 18th, 1934. I don't want it to be my fault if he doesn't like me anymore. Eva Braun.
For several months in the years 1934 and 1935, Eva Braun keeps a diary. The diary includes the period when she attempts suicide, probably to get Hitler to commit to her.
Diary, March the 11th, 1935. If only I'd never met him. I'm in despair. I'm buying sleeping powders again. He only needs me for certain purposes, nothing else is possible. When he says he loves me, he means it only at that moment. Eva Braun.
That was when Eva Braun attempted her first suicide. This act of desperation moved Hitler deeply. Christa Schröder.
Diary, April the 29th, 1935. The weather's so beautiful, and I, lover of the greatest man in Germany and the world, can enjoy the sun. Eva Braun.
Politically, she had no idea. You often heard Eva Braun complaining.
I don't know anything. Everything's kept secret from me.
Christa Schröder.
As for Eva Braun, no one outside the inner circles of the party and the SS knew of her until the last year of the war. Charles Bewley, Irish Envoy Extraordinary to Berlin, 1933 to 1939.
The existence of Hitler's girlfriend doesn't remain totally unknown. The news magazine Time and the Saturday Evening Post write about Hitler's romance.
December the 16th, 1939. In the closing days of last August, a blonde Bavarian girl named Eva Helen Braun moved into the Great Chancellery of Wilhelmstrasse. There she conducts herself as if she were the wife of the Nazi dictator. Of course, European intelligence services have long known about the relationship between Effie and Hitler. Richard Norbert, Saturday Evening Post.
When he retires, Hitler plans to build a residence in the Austrian town of Linz. Albert Speer revealed that Hitler intended to live out his final years there with Eva Braun.
Besides Fräulein Braun, I'll take nobody else with me. Fräulein Braun and my dog. I will be lonely. Everyone will be running after my successor. Adolf Hitler to Albert Speer.
Hitler's power and popularity are unquestioned. And Göring, the second man in the state, is similarly popular as well, if not as close to the Fuehrer as others. Hitler has created a secret private life and spends a lot of time in the Alps at Obersalzberg, which is declared a restricted area. Hitler threatens to invade Austria. The Austrian Chancellor surrenders, allowing the country to be taken over. In a subsequent plebiscite, nearly 100% of Austrians vote in favor of integration into the German Reich. This success encourages Hitler to repeat this tactic with Czechoslovakia, where a substantial German minority lives in the Sudetenland. Will he succeed again?
Has anything like the Third Reich ever existed before? Among the phenomenon that I have personally come across in my lifetime, Islam, the Mohammedan world and worldview, comes closest. The word Islam means devotion. It is the same thing as what is expressed by raising one's hand in the Nazi salute in the Third Reich. I am yours in life and in death. Islam is the higher ideal of the two, because it is nobler to serve God than a country or a race. Karen Tanja Blixen, Danish writer.
He has managed to captivate his people using a mystical band that is not even dependent on the National Socialist Party that helped him into power. I often have the opportunity to experience this, indeed in all social circles. Robert Coulondre, French ambassador to Berlin, 1938 and 1939.
Hitler's rule uses an aesthetic of overwhelming to bind the masses to the system. In the early days of his movement, well-organized and choreographed mass marches imply a strength which is in fact non-existent. After the seizure of power, he employs uniforms, dramaturgy, lighting effects known as cathedrals of light, and military pomp to amalgamate and unify the hurriedly summoned masses to a picture of strength, power and violence.
Of the facts themselves, there was no doubt. He had restored to Germany her self-respect and recreated orderliness out of the chaos and distress which had followed her defeat in 1918. Neville Henderson, British Ambassador to Germany.
The year 1937 is the quietest of Hitler's 12-year reign. There are no foreign policy provocations, no new racist laws, no publicly staged pogroms. If one were to believe the footage shot by amateur filmmakers who come from the upper middle class, the people in Hitler's Reich enjoy their lives.
For Hitler, driving is now only possible on the motorways, where the stewards are strictly prohibited from informing anyone en route or in the neighboring villages by phone. Otherwise, he would have to fly or travel by train. But to pay a lady a private visit in Munich, or anywhere else for that matter, is completely impossible. Henry Picker, Senior Executive Officer, Table Talk at the Wolfschanze Führer headquarters.
When you meet the Germans, you will probably think they are very much like us. They look like us. Except that there are fewer of the wiry type and more big, fleshy, fair-haired men and women, especially in the north. But they are not really so much like us as they look. Instructions for British servicemen in Germany, 1944. Germany report of the German Social Democratic Party, March the 12th, 1938. Inasmuch as the attitude of a whole nation can be summed up in a single formula, one could say something like, Hitler has the consent of the majority of people in two essential questions. He has created employment and made Germany strong. There is a great deal of dissatisfaction with the prevailing conditions, which, however, only applies to the worries of everyday life, and in most people has not led to fundamental opposition to the regime.
Heinrich Himmler visits Quedlinburg in the Prussian province of Saxony. In the medieval city, he propagates a cult around King Henry I, for Himmler, the founder of the German Reich. The king is buried in Quedlinburg Castle. The Reichsführer SS has been head of the German police in the Reich Ministry of the Interior since June 1936.
Client conversation in Nuremberg, 1945. Göring.
To the outside world, it looked like I was the second man in the government. But after 1942, my influence decreased.
Question. Who were your rivals for power? Göring.
Himmler, later Bormann.
Hermann Göring to his lawyer, Hermann Bruce.
When he had to make big decisions, he went up to Obersalzberg. Here, life was geared to his personal needs. Strolls around Obersalzberg, stopping in small guest houses, gave him, as he said, the inner peace and confidence to make the decisions that surprised the world. Albert Speer.
Diary, September the 18th, 1938. Drive to the tea house up on the mountain. It stands majestically in the midst of giant peaks, an undisturbed view. Here one finds clarity and confidence. All the ballast of Berlin disappears. Joseph Goebbels.
The entire Obersalzberg area is sealed off in 1935. Hitler asks Martin Bormann to pressure the house and hotel owners into selling their property to the NSDAP to create a so-called Führer security zone.
Meanwhile, it had become a custom for everyone who wanted to see their Führer to gather there in the afternoon. An aide gave the signal, and then everyone marched down the hill past Hitler, a touching spectacle of spontaneous tribute. For them, it was one of the biggest moments of their lives. Fritz Wiedemann, adjutant to Adolf Hitler.
One beautiful day, my school friends and I decided to visit Obersalzberg. Suddenly, Hitler appeared in front of his Berghof residence and greeted the lines of people. When we students from Munich reached where he was, an aide ran down. He told us, "The Führer wants to greet you." We followed him to the Berghof. Hitler stood there and shook our hands. He asked,
"Do you want to have tea with me?"
We found that really exciting, and we were led onto the terrace. Elisabeth Noller-Neumann, student in Munich.
Adolf Hitler invited a circle of people to Obersalzberg who were not selected for their politics. He chose those who were agreeable to him and would not disturb his thoughts with political discussions. Thus, the circle was made up of artists, some women, Fräulein Braun, mostly the secretaries, the personal and army adjutants, Ambassador Hevels, Sepp Dietrich, Professor Morel, Esser, and their wives. Bormann, Brandt, and I were also members of this circle. Albert Speer.
Usually, straight after dinner, there would be a discussion. After that, there was a stroll to the little tea house, half an hour's walk away from the Berghof. Hitler led the way with the honored guests. The others followed far enough behind to be out of earshot. The party met again on a plateau beneath a tea house that had a wide view of the Alps. The way back to the Berghof was always by car. Christa Schröder, Hitler's private secretary.
Hermann Göring does not belong to Hitler's private circle, although he owns a residence on Obersalzberg too. Hitler maintains no private relationship with him. The same is true of Heinrich Himmler and of Ribbentrop, whom Hitler appoints as foreign minister in February 1938, yet excludes him from his private life around Berghof.
Komm, ja, mein Cäsar. Kommst du mich besuchen? Mutti, kommst du mich besuchen, ja? Komm. Ordentlich satt geworden, Cäsar. Los, schön, spring, hopp. So ist gut.
Even as Hitler's deputy, I always had to restrain myself because I often didn't know about plans and projects. In secret, it was determined, and in 1936 then disclosed to the ministers that I would be considered the Führer's successor. Nevertheless, the Führer often did not inform me about important actions. Hermann Göring, conversation with Hermann Bross, Nuremberg 1945.
Volksschanze, Führer Headquarters. Lunch, October the 27th, 1941. The Reich Foreign Secretary is at present hunting pheasant in Sudetenau. This fact once again gave the Führer cause to pour scorn on the royal hunt. All his sympathies are on the side of the poachers, because first of all, these people must really understand something about hunting, and secondly, without the poachers, the most beautiful novels would never have been written. Werner Köppen, Adjutant to Reich Minister Alfred Rosenberg.
He didn't drink a drop of alcohol, never ate meat, didn't smoke. His asceticism was real and not artificial. Hans Frank, Reich Legal Director.
He ate only vegetarian dishes, usually an enormous plate of carrots, peas, asparagus, onions, leeks, sliced kohlrabi and potatoes, all mixed up together in a thick white sauce. Sefton Delmer, British correspondent for the Daily Express in Berlin.
One of those present asked his personal physician whether the health of the Reich Chancellor forced him to keep such a strict diet. And he answered that his Spartan habits were mainly for psychological reasons. Gustav Mannerheim, Finnish Field Marshal.
Apart from its state dinners, his table manners were uncultivated. Reinhard Spitzi, personal assistant to Joachim von Ribbentrop.
Incidentally, the Führer tried to spoil the meat-eaters' enjoyment of their meal.
Although he didn't want to convert anyone to vegetarianism, he suddenly began talking about how awful it was walking through an abattoir. Gertraud Traudl-Junge, Hitler's private secretary.
After the meal, there was black coffee, but nothing to smoke. Tobacco was banned from the entire chancellery, even in the toilets. Reinhard Spitzi.
Enjoying meat, he said, triggered a desire for alcohol. And then again, alcohol stimulated smoking. And this was how one vice led to another. Nicotine was, in his opinion, even worse than alcohol. He actually toyed with the idea of totally banning smoking throughout Germany. The campaign would start with a skull and crossbones printed on the cigarette packet. Christa Schröder.
Diary, January the 11th, 1938. Second air raid drill. We learned how to use gas masks. Henrietta Schneider.
Air raid drill at a factory against an attack with conventional and chemical weapons in Brunswick. Founded in April 1939, the Reich Luftschutzbund, or State Air Shelter League, unites all air raid activities. At the lowest level, it consists of volunteers from local communities and, at municipal level, the fire brigades. In 1939, 15 million people are brought together in the Luftschutzbund. During the war, the air raid community is mainly formed of older men and single women.
The Fuehrer had at this time something like the power of Napoleon after Austerlitz and Jena. Winston Churchill, member of the British Parliament.
Seefeld in Tyrol, on the day the Wehrmacht enter Austria. The Austrian NSDAP has been banned since 1933 for terrorist activities. Previously, they had received on average less than 25% of the vote at regional elections, but in some cities such as Innsbruck, more than 40%. On July the 25th, 1934, the Austrian National Socialists tried to stage a coup and failed. Already in July 1936, however, the National Socialists imprisoned in Austria were pardoned. The activities of the party were tolerated and it gained support, especially in Carinthia and Styria.
As far back as I can remember, the rise of Hitler in the powerful country next door cast a threatening shadow over us. Egon Schwartz, Austrian Jewish high school student in Vienna.
People knew about Dachau and Oranienburg. They didn't like to talk about it. Kurt Schuschnigg, Austrian Chancellor.
Apart from his resolve to bring all Teutonic races into the Reich, as so plainly described in Mein Kampf, Hitler had two reasons for wishing to absorb the Austrian Republic. It opened both the door of Czechoslovakia and the more spacious portals of southeastern Europe to Germany. Winston Churchill, the Second World War.
Führer's order, March the 11th, 1938, 8:45 p.m. Operation Otto. The demands of the German ultimatum to the Austrian government have not been fulfilled. To avoid further bloodshed in Austrian towns, the march of the German armed forces into Austria will commence at daybreak on March the 12th.
Adolf Hitler.
On Friday, the 11th of March, 1938, Austrian radio broadcast a program of light music. It was 7:45 in the evening when the announcer suddenly interrupted. The Chancellor was going to speak. Kurt Schuschnigg said that in order to avoid bloodshed, he would capitulate to Hitler's wishes. He ended his speech with the words, "God protect Austria." Dr. Edward Bloch, the Hitler's family doctor, written in US exile, March the 15th, 1941.
Diary, Sunday, March the 13th, 1938. In the evening, the announcement of the new law for Austria, issued by the Fuehrer in Linz. Adolf Hitler is now also the commander-in-chief of all troops in Austria. Henrietta Schneider.
If it is still claimed today that Hitler occupied Austria against the will of the Austrians, that doesn't coincide with my observations. Fritz Wiedemann, adjutant to Adolf Hitler.
It is correct to say that a very large number of Austrians were gladly prepared to accept National Socialism and integration into the German Reich. This number is made up of all those who were disappointed with the politics of compromise of previous years and who doubted that Austria would be able to hold out against National Socialism. Those who expected liberation from what they called clericalism, and above all, those who felt threatened by the Jewish menace. Ernst Rüdiger Stachenberg, leader of the Austrian Home Guard, from March 1938 in exile.
Women, especially, enjoyed decorating themselves with the emblems of National Socialism that they wore as medallions or brooches. By contrast, there was terror and fear among the opponents of National Socialism. The fear was particularly acute among the Jews and led to hasty actions and suicides. Egon Basch, St. Pölten, German-Austrian Jew.
Diary, Tuesday, March the 15th, 1938. We listened to the Führer around 11 o'clock. You asked yourself, can it be possible that we have become a great unified Reich without a war? In the evening, Kurt Riewer's engagement appeared in the newspaper. Henrietta Schneider.
Hitler's speech from a balcony of the Habsburg Palace. As Führer and Chancellor of the German nation and Reich, I report before history the entry of my homeland into the German Reich.
On March the 25th, 1938, Hitler begins the last election campaign of his life. Hitler wants to confirm the annexation of Austria in a referendum. He estimates 80% will vote in favor of it in Austria. With a public information film, the population in what is now the Greater German Reich is informed how and above all where they should mark their crosses in the plebiscite.
Oh, das ist doch ganz einfach. Haben Sie ein Dokument bei sich? Erkennungskarte oder Heimatschein, Taufschein, Reisepass oder sonst eine amtliche Legitimation? Der Meldezettel allein genügt nicht.
Meinen Taufschein habe ich mitgenommen und meinen Heimatschein.
Eines von beiden genügt schon. Und dass Sie keinen Fehler machen, werde ich Ihnen drinnen im Stimmlokal alles erklären. Also jetzt passen Sie gut auf. Der Herr, der dort hinter dem Tisch sitzt, das ist der Wahlleiter. Zu dem gehen Sie hin und sagen Ihren Namen und Ihre Adresse und zeigen ihm Ihr Dokument. Josef Berghofer, Hauptstraße 43. Sehen Sie, Einer der Beisitzer schaut jetzt nach, ob der Wähler in der Stimmliste enthalten ist. 412. Jetzt bekommt der Wähler einen Stimmzettel und einen Briefumschlag, mit dem er dort in die Stimmzelle geht. In der Stimmzelle macht man da mit dem Bleistift in den großen Kreis, bei dem ein Ja steht, ein Kreuz. In den großen Kreis, bei dem ein Ja steht, ein Kreuz. Das ist sehr wichtig und legt den Stimmzettel in den Briefumschlag. Auf dem Stimmzettel darf nichts anderes vermerkt werden, als nur das Kreuz in dem Ja-Kreis, sonst ist der Stimmzettel ungültig. Den Briefumschlag mit dem Stimmzettel übergibt man dann dem Wahlleiter, der ihn ungeöffnet in die Wahlurne legt.
Dankeschön. Ist das alles?
Eigentlich nicht. Denn nachher, wenn Sie abgestimmt haben, müssen Sie nach Hause gehen und dafür sorgen, dass auch alle Ihre Bekannten rechtzeitig zur Abstimmung kommen.
Hitler estimates 80% will vote in favour of it in Austria. He's more than surprised when on the evening of April the 10th, the referendum results are announced. 99.75% have voted for the Anschluss, more than in the Old Reich. Election Day in Schwetzingen, 10 kilometers west of Heidelberg. On April the 10th, 1938, in combination with the plebiscite on the annexation of Austria to the German Reich, an election for the now Greater German Reichstag takes place. Between November 1933 and April 1938, Adolf Hitler calls 3 elections for the German Reichstag, which has been disempowered by the Enabling Act. These elections to his pseudo-parliament are fixed and anything but free. They do not say anything about the support of Germans for Hitler's policies. For example, unmarked ballots are considered as being in favour. Germans of Jewish descent and so-called Jewish half-breeds lost the right to vote in 1935. Between March 1933 and April 1942, Hitler convenes the powerless parliament to confirm his policies just 19 times.
As it turned out, in the Great German Vote, all the staff in Paul Zollneiss's house, from the chauffeur to the chambermaids, are party members. Everyone is reeling from the euphoria that occurs with the typical signs of an epidemic. Even those far away are exposed to the contagion. Frank Thies, German writer, Fragments of Historical Experiences.
All laws enacted before then, including the Jewish acts that were passed in 1935 in Nuremberg and later strengthened and significantly extended, would be transferred at once and with full force to the new territory, and its entire state and social life turned upside down overnight. Egon Schwartz, Austrian Jewish high school student in Vienna, later historian.
A march passed in Lower Austria to mark May the 1st. Austria's Social Democrats had won more than 40% of the votes in the last free National Council elections. The National Socialists tried to win over the Social Democrat supporters who, in the form of the Schutzbund, had once fought street battles with the SA.
Hermann Neubacher, National Socialist, Mayor of Vienna since April the 12th, 1938. Former members of the Schutzbund, we understand you. You believed, as we also believe. You stood up for it, as we did during difficult years. You were revolutionaries, as are we. Today we extend our hand. Are you prepared to work with us faithfully, and until the very last? Then I accept your vow. To our great Führer, Sieg Heil.
Summer at Lake Atta in the Salzkammergut resort. The middle class have also come to terms with the Anschluss, which has been overwhelmingly promoted in mass initiatives and propaganda campaigns. The Catholic German nationalism of the Christian social movement, dominant up until 1938, facilitates the abandonment of almost all resistance. Hitler has imprisoned the leading politicians of the Ständestaat, the corporate class state, as, for example, the mayor of Vienna, Richard Schmitz, and ex-chancellor Kurt Schuschnigg.
Diary, May 26, 1938. I have requested permission to emigrate. I feel that I have to leave Germany before it is too late. War seems unavoidable. It will, I fear, encompass all of Europe, if not the whole world. Bella Fromm, German Jewish journalist.
Membership in the Hitler Youth ends at the age of 18, in the Federation of German Girls at 17. Hitler had appointed von Schirach Reich youth leader in 1931 at the age of 24. At that time, the leading cadres of the Hitler Youth were hardly older than those entrusted to them. According to Hitler's instruction, youth should be led by youth.
The National Revolution is undoubtedly a youth movement. The new Germany is being built by the young for the young. The military discipline, which serves as a backdrop to the present drama, provides remarkable contrasts. Antoni Count-Sobanski, Polish writer.
In 1938, in a revised version of the Marriage Act, conceiving children is defined as the purpose of marriage. The refusal of a spouse is considered grounds for divorce, but the National Socialists cannot stop the long-term trend towards smaller families. The average size of household and family continues to shrink in the years 1933 to 1945. In 1920, there was an average of 2.3 children per marriage. In 1930, 2.2, and in 1940, only 1.8 children. Hitler is driven by the notion that he will only be granted a short life.
Note of a Hitler speech to NSDAP propaganda leaders. He, Hitler, did not have much longer to live, according to human estimates. People did not grow old in his family. It was therefore necessary to solve the problems as soon as possible so that this would happen during his lifetime. Only he was able to do this. Waldemar Vogt, provincial propaganda leader, Main, Franconia.
My personal last will and testament. In the case of my death, I dispose that my remains be buried in the right-hand temple of the Eternal Guardhouse. My coffin should resemble the others. That my entire estate be left to the party. To Fräulein Eva Braun, Munich, a lifelong allowance of 1,000 marks per month. To my sister Angela, Dresden, a lifelong allowance of 1,000 marks per month. To my sister Paula, Vienna, a lifelong allowance of 1,000 marks per month. To my stepbrother Alois Hitler, the lump sum of 60,000 marks. To my trusted Julius Schaup, the lump sum of 10,000 marks and a lifelong monthly pension of 500 marks. I appoint the Master of the Treasury as executor of this testament. In the case of his death, Martin Bormann. Berlin, May the 2nd, 1938. Adolf Hitler.
Trappau lies near the German border. Whenever we came up to the border, several in the group broke away, ran across the borderline, and kissed the German earth. Later, I learned that these children were ethnic Germans who were raised to love Germany. Ruth Elias, Czech Jew.
The history of the Sudeten German liberation movement is closely linked to Adolf Hitler's National Socialism. Although we were never allowed to have a shared organization with the National Socialists in the Reich for political and foreign policy reasons, no artificial barriers could prevent the spirit of Adolf Hitler from attracting ever larger masses of Sudeten Germans. Swastika flags flew on the streets of Sudeten German districts and cities. The marching columns of a faithful German youth, devoted unto death, broke the Marxist rule of violence. Hans Krebs, German National Socialist Workers' Party of Czechoslovakia, MP.
Diary, Monday, September the 12th, 1938. In the evening, we heard the close of the party convention in Nuremberg. Adolf Hitler called on President Benesch. If the Sudeten Germans are not protected, we know what we have to do. God preserve the existing peace. Diary, Thursday, September the 15th, 1938. My 66th birthday. England's Prime Minister Chamberlain is with the Fuehrer today. I had many guests. Henrietta Schneider.
The British Prime Minister made a really good impression on our people. But unfortunately, he wasn't the right man for Hitler. He was too kind and decent. One should have found a different negotiating partner for Hitler. A bulldog like Churchill or a hard-headed colonial general. A negotiator like that would have made more of an impression than benign Uncle Chamberlain with his umbrella. Reinhard Spitzi, personal assistant to Joachim von Ribbentrop.
Speech in the Berlin Sportpalast, September the 26th, 1938. I also want to declare now, before the German people, that with respect to the Sudeten German problem, my patience is now exhausted. I have made Mr. Benesch an offer, peace or war. Either he finally gives the Germans their freedom, or we will come and take this freedom ourselves.
Adolf Hitler.
Diary, Tuesday, September the 27th, 1938. Hitler spoke to the German people last night. If Benesch doesn't accept his offer, we'll move in on October the 1st. That means war. Henrietta Schneider.
There were various different tones to these discussions. Hitler found friendly words of recognition for Chamberlain, and Lotus spoke the oft-quoted sentence,
"We don't want any Czechs."
Paul Otto Schmidt, interpreter for Adolf Hitler.
Diary, Wednesday, September the 28th, 1938. Tomorrow, a meeting in Munich between Hitler, Daladier, Chamberlain and Mussolini. Henrietta Schneider.
In spite of the harshness and ruthlessness I thought I saw in his face, I got the impression that here was a man who could be relied upon when he had given his word. Neville Chamberlain, British Prime Minister, letter to his sister.
Diary, Friday, September the 30th, 1938. The negotiations in Munich have had a happy ending. The Czechs have to pull out of the Sudetenland tomorrow. Hitler, our Prince of Peace. Henrietta Schneider.
The genius of the Fuehrer and his determination not to shrink, even in the face of war, have again achieved victory without the use of force. Alfred Jodl.
Letter to Elizabeth Wagner, October the 9th, 1938. The occupation is going smoothly. Unfortunately, we've swallowed 500,000 Czechs. Eduard Wagner, Colonel in the General Staff.
The increasingly heady atmosphere of the days of the occupation has already ebbed away. Nevertheless, one has to say that National Socialism has been accepted everywhere, Soon after the occupation, we received letters from relatives of refugees, mostly comrades, that clearly showed that they too had been convinced by National Socialism. Germany Report of the German Social Democratic Party, December the 10th, 1938.
Everyone concurs that the Munich Agreement is Hitler's victory. But Hitler himself sees it as a defeat. He would have preferred to gain what he's achieved by force rather than peacefully.
Sudeten German Diary, October the 19th, 1938. On the order of our Führer, we've been able to occupy a new piece of Germany for Germany. We were all prepared to give our best, including our lives, for this task. Benno von Arendt, Reich Set Designer, Reserve Officer.
Protocol of Interrogations in Berlin Gestapo Office, November the 21st, 1939, 8:30 a.m. In autumn 1938, the working class generally expected a war. After the Munich Agreement, the working class was quiet again. I was already convinced last year that the Munich Agreement would not hold and that war was unavoidable. George Elser, failed assassin of Hitler in November 1939.
On Monday, November the 7th, 1938, the stateless 17-year-old Jewish boy Grünspan goes to the German embassy, demands to speak with one of the counselors, is taken to the duty counselor vom Rat, and shoots him. Grünspan describes the motive for the act as wanting to take revenge for his fellow believers, for the Polish Jews forced out of Germany. Walter Tausk, German Jew, Wroclaw Diary.
In Munich, the failed putsch of 1923 was celebrated with great pomp. The SS marched through all over the city. The radio announced the death of the diplomat. Edgar Feuchtwanger, German Jewish neighbor of Adolf Hitler.
Die Feierlichkeiten am 9. November in München fanden ihren Abschluss mit der Vereidigung der SS-Anwärter auf dem Platz vor der Feldherrnhalle in Anwesenheit des Führers.
Following a traditional march to the Feldherrnhalle, at a social evening of NS party leaders and old comrades, Joseph Goebbels announces the death of Ernst vom Rath.
I go to the party reception in the Old Town Hall. Very busy. I report the matter to the Führer. He orders,
withdraw the police. The Jews should for once feel the people's anger.
Joseph Goebbels, diary.
It was clear to me that something would happen outside in the Reich. I believe that the saying, "the Jews will pay for this," was widely misunderstood. Hartmann Lauterbacher, Deputy Leader, Hitler Youth.
Diary, November 1938. In the night that brings the news of the death, a pogrom breaks out all over Germany. All the synagogues are on fire, windows are smashed in all the Jewish shops, the wares destroyed. Apartments are broken into. Thousands of Jewish men are arrested and locked up in concentration camps. Kita Kollwitz, painter and sculptress.
The synagogue in Esslingen in Württemberg is plundered by residents of the town on the afternoon of November the 10th. Religious artifacts are burned.
Hermann screamed hysterically.
These damn idiots! I have to collect every old bucket and every old newspaper in Germany, and then a horde of hooligans goes around and destroys things worth millions in one evening.
My concern was the methods that the regime was using to deal with its political opponents. I was deeply shocked, and I said to Hermann, "Fate has blessed your party so. Don't sin." Emmy Göring, Historical Events and Confessions.
When that segment of the population that had not taken part either as police or SA awoke after the fatal night and saw the destruction that had taken place, a sequence unfolded that its instigators had not expected. An unmistakable, deep sense of depression and shame seized the public. People said, "I'm ashamed to be a German." Rudolf Bing, German-Jewish businessman, Nuremberg.
November the 10th, 1938. Meeting in the Ministry of Aviation. Göring again openly expressed his reluctance, but nevertheless issued an abundance of repulsive regulations. Things like Jews should not visit theaters, museums, and beach resorts, and shouldn't drive cars. Göring said himself in the meeting, he wouldn't want to live in Germany as a Jew anymore. Hans Kerl, official in charge of special tasks in the Economics Ministry, Memoirs.
As with the Night of the Long Knives, we considered the Kristallnacht to be an unavoidable peripheral phenomenon of the otherwise accepted National Socialist seizure of power, which only now began to reveal its revolutionary character. Rudolf Wolters, architect, employee of Albert Speer.
Entering public parks is forbidden to Viennese Jews, along with the Schönbrunn Palace Gardens. In the districts of the German Ostmark, as in the rest of the German Reich, the Nuremberg race laws apply. Between March 1938 and May 1939 alone, 100,000 Austrians of Jewish descent leave their home country, with most having to abandon almost all their property. By 1942, another 30,000 will emigrate or flee.
Diary, December the 6th, 1938. A boycott has been issued against Jews throughout the Reich. The ban against Jews in Berlin applies to all theaters, cinemas, cabarets, concert and lecture halls, museums, fairs, the radio tower, the Deutschlandhalle and the Sportpalast. In addition, all outdoor and indoor swimming pools, as well as from Wilhelmstraße and Vossstraße to the Reich Monument and the Zeughaus. Erich Ebermeier, writer.
Harassed by the Nazi authorities, around 120,000 German and Austrian Jews succeed in leaving their homeland by the beginning of the Second World War.
I used my final days in Germany to bid farewell to my old homeland. With my children, I walked through the spring along the old familiar paths through the forests and fields, where every tree and every house had associations. Never again in my life would I walk on these paths. A man comes along, the Fuehrer of 80 million people, and declares that Jews can't have a home. That Jews are a nomadic people who can never settle, who always need to roam. Hugo Moses, German Jewish owner of the Progress Factory, Cologne.
After the Saarland referendum and reunification with the German Reich, Hitler repeatedly declares that he has no further territorial claims and just wants peace. Already in March 1938, he breaks his word and uses the threat of a military occupation to annex Austria. He then threatens to invade parts of Czechoslovakia and, thanks to the Munich Agreement of October 1938, is able to claim a large part of the country. The German people are enthusiastic about the successes achieved without conflict. But Hitler secretly longs for war and continues with his aggressive strategy. After the shock of his breach of the Munich Agreement and occupation of the rest of Czechoslovakia, Europe now waits to see if he will endanger the peace of the whole continent. Hitler is convinced that Great Britain and France want to avoid a war. Will he go further?
Diary, January the 1st, 1939. A new year. May it be a year of peace. Thea Sternheim, art collector and author.
Until the beginning of October 1938, the White Meadow was in the Czech part of the Sudeten Mountains and is now part of the German Reichsgau Sudetenland. This new district has almost 3 million inhabitants who see themselves as Germans and welcome the Anschluss, the union with the German Reich. The thus far peaceful extension of territorial dominion is also received extremely positively in the other parts of the German Reich. On the 13th of February 1939, Hitler tells a few confidants that he intends to take action against the Czechs in mid-March. German propaganda is adjusted accordingly.
Diary. Berlin, March the 14th, 1939. Nighttime. Foreign broadcasters are reporting that the Czechoslovak President Hacha arrived in Berlin today and was received by Hitler. Does this mean war, after all? Erich Ebermeier, writer.
In the meantime, I dealt with the transcription of the statement of just a few lines, reading, "The Czechoslovak president has declared that he has trustingly placed the fate of the Czech people and country in the hands of the Fuehrer of the German Reich." The Fuehrer accepted this declaration and expressed his intention of taking the Czech people under the protection of the German Reich and guaranteeing them autonomous development of their ethnic life suited to their character. Paul Otto Schmidt, interpreter for Adolf Hitler.
For 3 hours, Hitler conducted a discussion with the president of Czechoslovakia. We all knew that it was about war or peace. Suddenly the door opened. Hitler rushed out and proclaimed,
So, people, good news. Fuehrer has signed the agreement. I will go down as the greatest German in history.
Christa Schröder, Hitler's private secretary.
Letter to Elisabeth Wagner, March the 15th, 1939, evening. The Fuehrer drove to Prague at 4 o'clock this afternoon. He is staying in Prague Castle. In the morning, there will be a parade. His dream is thus fulfilled. Eduard Wagner, Artillery General.
Diary. Thursday, March the 16th, 1939. The Fuhrer had the contents of Article 13 on the establishment of the Protectorate announced over the radio. Henrietta Schneider, housekeeper, East Prussia.
After World War I, the Allied victors awarded the Rhineland to Lithuania. After threats of military force, Hitler sets an ultimatum for bringing Rhineland home to the Reich. In the face of a complete lack of international support, Lithuania complies.
Letter to Elisabeth Wagner, Berlin, March the 22nd, 1939. The Fuhrer will move into Memel, East Prussia tomorrow, but there will be no fuss made about it in the rest of the world. Eduard Wagner.
Diary. Thursday, March the 23rd, 1938. Around 2:30, the Fuhrer spoke to the Memellanders. He had come to Memel in the armoured ship Deutschland with a whole fleet. His words were uplifting. Henrietta Schneider.
Secret report to Ambassador Josef Lipski in Berlin. Everyone is awaiting further steps from Hitler. It is generally assumed that after the annexation of Memel, he has to move on to the settlement demands with Poland, primarily the takeover of Danzig and the corridor. The solution to these questions will meet with understanding and recognition by the German people. Felix Tyszewski, Polish General Consul.
A meeting in Schorfheide near Berlin in spring 1939. Hermann Göring and the British ambassador Neville Henderson.
We had reached the last act of the drama, and the curtain for it had gone up on that momentous March the 31st, when Mr. Chamberlain had announced our agreement with Poland. Neville Henderson, British Ambassador to Germany.
House of Commons, March the 31st, 1939. I have to inform the House that during that period, in the event of any action which clearly threatened Polish independence, His Majesty's government would feel themselves bound at once to lend the Polish government all support in their power. They have given the Polish government an assurance to that effect. I may add that the French government have authorized me to make it plain that they stand in the same position. Neville Chamberlain, Prime Minister.
But no one who understood the situation could doubt that it meant in all human probability a major war in which we should be involved. Winston Churchill, member of the House of Commons.
Letter to his wife, Vita Sackville-West, April the 20th, 1939. Harold Nicholson, Member of Parliament, National Labour Party. There is a break in the crisis, which makes me uneasy. That is one of the worst things with this tension. If Hitler doesn't do anything, we all become uneasy. And if he does do something, we all get frightened.
Hitler deliberately focuses on strengthening military traditions. In Schwetzingen, in the southwestern German provinces, a veteran of the Franco-German War is buried. Everything is now a matter for the party and its structures. a representative of the Wehrmacht holds a eulogy at the grave. In 1939, the NSDAP has 5.3 million members. Its mass organizations such as the SA, the Hitler Youth and the German Labour Front are responsible for another 30 million Germans, a nation marching in step towards war.
May 1939. Dear Dilemma, it's pretty damned interesting. Was up in Danzig for a couple of days. Danzig is completely Nazified. Lots of Heil Hitler, etc. I think that if Hitler can extricate himself from this matter without losing face, he will do so. If Ribbentrop and the radicals get their way, it will be interesting to see what happens in the end. Don't forget, the Poles are no Czechs, and they will fight. John F. Kennedy, letter to his childhood friend, Kirk Lem Billings.
June the 6th, 1939. Amateur footage of the flags in the street Unter den Linden from a window in the French embassy. The SS is distributing German and Italian flags on the occasion of the parade celebrating the return of the Condor Legion from the Spanish Civil War. The Germans have known for only a few weeks that, together with Italian troops, this Luftwaffe unit helped the Spanish fascists to victory over the left-wing Republic, thereby gaining experience of aerial warfare in a covert operation.
Speech at the Carlton Club, London, June the 28th, 1939. What is Herr Hitler going to do? Is he going to try to blow up the world or not? The world is a very heavy thing to blow up. An extraordinary man at a pinnacle of power may create a great explosion, and yet the civilized world may remain unshaken. But the world will go on. Winston Churchill.
The market in Swinemünde, a port on the Baltic Sea in the province of Pomerania. In the mid-1930s, per capita income in Germany is only half that of America. Above all, agriculture, from which 9 million Germans live, is still underdeveloped. In 1928, only 68% of the German Reich could supply itself with food. But by 1939, this share has risen to 83%. Mainly meat and fats still have to be imported. Nobody is starving in Germany anymore. The Germans are doing well.
In my memory, the summer of 1939 will remain a strange unreality of a cosmically disturbed world, as a tragically terrifying calm before the storm. Arno Breker, sculptor and architect.
July the 2nd, 1939. Rudolf Hess deputizes for Adolf Hitler in his function as leader of the NSDAP at the Gautag on the Siegfried Line district celebration in Kaiserslautern, only 40 kilometers from the French border. Since 1936, Hitler has been building the 630-kilometer-long Siegfried Line along the border with France, Belgium, Luxembourg and the Netherlands. Up to 1 million men from all over Germany have been conscripted to work on the fortification of the western border.
I still remember how I threw my aunt's cat from the second-floor window and it landed unharmed. When it had kittens, my cousin Maurice was told to dispose of them. One by one, he hurled them against a wall like snowballs, and they fell lifeless to the ground like empty little bags. This was the first experience of death through violence and a foretaste of what the Nazis were to inflict upon the population of Alsace. Tommy Ungerer, A Childhood Under the Nazis.
Sunday, July the 16th, 1939. A Guard battalion has lined up before Adolf Hitler outside the Museum of German Art in Munich. Since this summer, Wehrmacht officers and party officials are allowed to wear the white tunics as a dress uniform. Hitler, followed by Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler in black SS uniform, walks up the steps of the museum. Inside the museum, too, there are almost exclusively uniformed men to be seen. One of the few civilians present on this summer Sunday is the museum's director, Karl Kolb. Uniforms are omnipresent in everyday life in the German Reich. This morning, Adolf Hitler is attending the opening of the Great German Art Exhibition of 1939 at the Museum of German Art. Hitler takes the floor, but, as often, does not speak without notes. It is his last speech on matters of culture. Following this, Hitler inspects the exhibition with his confidant in art affairs, the architect Gerdi Trost. They are accompanied by Dino Alfieri, Mussolini's Minister of Popular Culture, who will become ambassador to Berlin at the end of the year. Most of the exhibiting artists are in tails. Accompanied by Air Force Adjutant Nikolaus von Below and his factotum Julius Schaub in SS uniform, Hitler hurries to his Munich apartment. In the afternoon, more than 30,000 participants in the 2,000 Years of German Culture Parade will file past the Fuehrer.
Ashram at Warda, Congress Party of India, July the 23rd, 1939. Herr Hitler, Berlin, Germany. Dear friend, friends have been urging me to write to you for the sake of humanity. It is quite clear that you are today the one person in the world who can prevent a war which may reduce humanity to a savage state. Are you really willing to pay that price for an object, however worthy it may appear to you to be? Will you listen to the appeal of one who has deliberately shunned the method of war, not without considerable success? Anyway, I anticipate your forgiveness if I have erred in writing to you. I remain your sincere friend, Mahatma Gandhi.
Letter to Max Born, Edinburgh, August the 1st, 1939. I don't want to write much about the witch's cauldron that is Germany. Those who, like you, participated in 1933 have no idea what it is like in 1938-39. Words cannot describe how this great nation is tearing itself apart. Otto Toeplitz, German mathematician of Jewish descent.
The imperial city of Augsburg. In 1939, the medieval trading city has 185,000 inhabitants and has been the location of important industries since the second half of the 19th century. Here too, from the end of the 1930s, there is a consistent focus on war production. The Augsburg-Nuremberg engineering works manufacture, among other things, diesel engines for submarines. The Messerschmitt factories produce fighters and bombers, the Renk factories large gearboxes. From 1943, Allied bombers will begin destroying the Bavarian armaments complex.
The summer was winding down. The weather was warm and sultry, and Danzig's numerous cafes, beer and wine gardens were filled with Germans enjoying themselves, despite all the talk of imminent war. It was difficult to conceive of such folks going to war or causing war to break out over them. William Shirer, correspondent for the Columbia Broadcast System in Berlin.
On August the 11th, 1939, the town of Perleberg in the Prussian province of Brandenburg, northwest of Berlin, celebrates its 700th anniversary. The number of uniformed people in the historic parade shows that the National Socialists have managed to attract both young and old. A music corps of the Luftwaffe. Since 1934, Perleberg has been the location of a military airbase. The Organisation Todt, a paramilitary construction group, the National Socialist Motorized Corps, and the local political leaders of the NSDAP. A brass band of the General SS, followed by regional SS stormtroopers, the Reich Labour Service. Hitler is marching Germany to war.
Hitler could also keep secrets with astonishing mastery. He never told us his secret intentions or informed us about his plans. Christa Schröder.
August the 13th, 1939. Obersalzberg. Paul Otto Schmidt, interpreter of Adolf Hitler. Hitler was completely set on war.
The British are guilty of everything. The Poles have a serious lesson to learn. The democracies are inferior to Germany and will never fight.
Was the recurring keynote of the German dictator's speeches. The next day, the Italian Foreign Minister Ciano was received at the Burghof. Hitler spoke the following sentence at this event.
I am firmly convinced that neither England nor France will enter into a general war.
Italy's foreign minister cannot talk Adolf Hitler out of his war plans. The Kingdom of Italy is tightly bound by the Pact of Steel to the German Reich. However, the Duce, Benito Mussolini, reveals to Hitler in a letter that the country is not prepared for war. When Hitler gives the order to invade Poland, Italy withholds its allegiance. Hitler doesn't even bother to answer a final attempt at mediation by Mussolini. On August the 19th, Käthe and Erich Höse from Leipzig begin their honeymoon with a canoe trip on the Oder River in Upper Silesian Ratibor. They take Erich's camera.
As I look back at the summer of 1939, I see that I remained woefully ignorant of the secret agreement between Nazi Germany and Communist Russia. William Shirer, U.S. journalist.
For 12 days, the newlywed Leipzigers paddle down the Oder. During this time, Adolf Hitler propels the continent into a world war.
Diary, Paris, August the 19th, 1939. Announcement of a German-Russian non-aggression pact. Thea Sternheim.
At the end of July, on Hitler's approval, Foreign Minister von Ribbentrop and State Secretary von Weizsäcker set the foundations for an agreement with the Soviet Union, which also includes the partitioning of Poland and the Baltic states. Hitler is in a hurry because he believes autumn rains will prevent a motorized war in backward Poland.
On August the 19th, Stalin accepted Hitler's offer with both hands after Hitler had suggested splitting the Baltic into spheres of influence. I noted, but if Ribbentrop travels to Moscow, it means Russia is inviting Hitler to invade Poland. Ernst von Weizsäcker, Secretary of State at the Foreign Office, Memoirs.
Telegram to the German Chancellor, Herr A. Hitler, August the 21st, 1939. I thank you for your letter. I hope that the German-Soviet non-aggression pact will be a turning point and a serious improvement in political relations between our countries. The Soviet government has instructed me to tell you that they agree to the arrival of Herr von Ribbentrop in Moscow on August the 23rd. J. Stalin.
Diary, August the 22nd, 1939. About 4 years ago, the Fuehrer told a foreigner in my presence that he couldn't cooperate with Moscow because it wouldn't be possible to forbid the German people from stealing and at the same time maintain a friendship with thieves. Alfred Rosenberg, Director of the Foreign Policy Office of the NSDAP.
Diary, August the 23rd, 1939. In the evening, I sit in the Pilsner on the Kurfürstendamm. I allow the street life to flow past me. People with a burden, who well know what's going on, somewhat sad and thoughtful. Eduard Wagner, Artillery General.
August the 22nd, 1939. The speech in which Hitler addressed military leaders took place in the great reception room of the Berghof. He was of the opinion that, ultimately, the Western powers would not take up the sword. Erich von Manstein, Lieutenant General.
Address to the Commanders-in-Chief of the military, August the 22nd, 1939. It was becoming clear to me that a dispute with Poland might take place at an unfavorable time. Here is the basis for this finding. It depends essentially on me, on my existence, on my political ability, for it is a fact that probably no one will ever have the trust of the entire German people as I do. In the future, there will probably never be a man who has more authority than I. My presence, therefore, is of great value. But I can be eliminated at any time by a criminal or by an idiot.
Adolf Hitler.
Diary, Sunday, August the 27th, 1939. Exchange of letters between Hitler and Chamberlain. Hitler wants Danzig and the corridor for Germany. Henrietta Schneider.
Suffocatingly humid days full of fear and expectations. Very calm, now only a few cars, but trains, almost without a break, whistling shrilly. You can't do anything, can't think, can't feel anything other than no war. Marie-Louise Kaschnitz, author. Notes.
Diary, Monday, August the 28th, 1939. We believe that there will be war. Yesterday, rationing introduced for milk, fat, coffee, textiles and other things. Potatoes, flour, bakery products, vegetables, eggs are free. Diary, Wednesday, August the 30th, 1939. In the afternoon, troops equipped for war passed for hours, heading for the border. Poland has declared mobilization. Henrietta Schneider.
On August the 30th, Käthe and Erich Höse reached the delta of the Oder River and Stettin, the harbour. Government cruise liners are anchored here, placed under the protection of the Red Cross as hospital ships. 2 days after the honeymooners arrive in Stettin, the Second World War begins. Erich Höse becomes a soldier on September the 1st.
Autumn is coming. The terrifying autumn of 1939. For suddenly the world is trembling. The trembling now felt is long delayed and has time and again been bravely warded off. Hitler invades Poland, England's ward of court. Friedrich Hollander, German composer.
Night of August the 30th, 31st, 1939. In these hours, I knew that if war came, and who could doubt its coming, a major burden would fall upon me. Winston Churchill.
Edward Wagner, Diary, August the 31st, 1939. With General Halder at 5 p.m., I read the Fuhrer's order.
The Supreme Commander of the German Armed Forces, August the 31st, 1939. Secret command material, top priority, only via officers, 8 copies, second copy. The invasion of Poland is to be conducted according to the Case White preparations, with those changes that occur with the army now in near full deployment. If England and France begin hostilities against Germany, the Western operations of the German armed forces should provide careful consideration of force resources to ensure conditions for the successful conclusion of the operation against Poland. Adolf Hitler.
It is disturbing to see the amount of responsibility that he bears and accepts. Edward Wagner.
Private War Diary, General Franz Halder. Demands of the Führer on the military leadership. Destruction of Poland equals elimination of its living power. It is not about achieving a specific line or a new border, but about destroying the enemy. The means are of little concern.
The Führer will no longer speak to anybody from outside. Consultation. We stay in the Chancellery until midnight, and then sleep. Tonight, fate will take its course. Joseph Goebbels, Diary.
Message from Commander of Westerplatte Peninsula to Polish Navy Headquarters in Gdynia, September the 1st, 1939, 0450. At 0445, the armored cruiser Schleswig-Holstein opened fire on the Westerplatte with all its guns. The barrage continues. Henryk Zukarski, Major of the Polish Army.
Im Zeichen schwerster polnischer Bedrohung erklärt Danzig am 1. September 1939 seine Heimkehr ins Reich. Noch haben sich bewaffnete polnische Banden im Postgebäude verschanzt. Sie bedrohen von hier aus den Frieden der Stadt. Männer der Danziger Heimwehr räuchern im Schutze eines Panzerwagens diesen gefährlichen Schlupfwinkel aus.
War Diary, September the 1st, 1939, Friday, 7th day of mobilization, 6:30 a.m. Border overrun everywhere. 10 a.m., the Führer's Reichstag speech. Franz Halder, Chief of the General Staff.
Diary, Friday, September the 1st, 1939. Poland has rejected Hitler's offer. The radio announces the actions of our troops in all of Poland. All our men from 16 to 55 years old have to go to Lützen, East Prussia. Henrietta Schneider.
Now we are at war. God grant that not everything good and valuable should perish. The less time it takes, the better. Yet one must consider that our opponents are not going to reach a peace agreement with Hitler and Ribbentrop. What this means? Who would not be able to see the consequences? Ernst von Weizsäcker, State Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Morning, 10 a.m. Reichstag session. Hitler appears, deadly serious, for the first time in field grey uniform. Members of Parliament rise silently. Then Hitler speaks without notes, describing the events of the last days. Then comes a sentence.
Since 5:45 a.m., we have been returning fire.
Rudolf Jordan, provincial NSDAP leader.
Address before the Reichstag, September the 1st, 1939. I have once more put on that coat that was most sacred and dear to me. I will not take it off again until victory is secured, or I will not survive the outcome. Adolf Hitler.
I have a clear memory of the day war broke out. The adults were really serious. Many women cried. On the Rhine bridge, the first refugees of the Second World War passed by. They were farmers from southern Palatinate villages who had been evacuated from the threatened region behind Hitler's acclaimed fortifications along the French-German border, and who were now going to assembly centres with the few belongings they could take. The ramshackle carts were drawn by cows. Helmut Kohl, schoolboy, later Prime Minister of Germany.
Toward the evening of September the 2nd, our son Heinrich was killed in action. The site of his swift and untimely death was the Tuchola forest region at the train crossing near Kloneval. It occurred while Heinrich, a lieutenant and leader of the 1st Platoon of the 9th Infantry Regiment, was advancing against Polish riflemen ahead of his troops. Our son Richard, who is in the same regiment, held the death watch for his brother until the early morning hours of September the 3rd. Ernst von Weizsäcker, Memoirs.
In the early hours, 4 a.m., of September the 3rd, I was accordingly instructed by His Majesty's government to arrange for a meeting with the Minister for Foreign Affairs at 9 a.m. I accordingly handed the final ultimatum from His Majesty's government to Dr. Schmidt at precisely 9 a.m., pointing out that, unless satisfactory assurances were received by His Majesty's government before 11 a.m. British summer time of the suspension of all the German forces from Poland, a state of war would exist between our two countries as from that hour. Neville Henderson.
Then I took the ultimatum to the Chancellery. Hitler's most prominent people were gathered in the room in front of his office. "What news?" asked anxious voices. I answered with a shrug, schools cancelled, and entered the next room where Hitler was sitting at his desk, while Ribbentrop stood at the window. I remained some distance from Hitler's desk and slowly translated the ultimatum of the British government. When I finished, there was total silence. Hitler sat as though turned to stone, just looking straight ahead. After a while, he turned to Ribbentrop.
"What now?"
Ribbentrop replied with a quiet voice,
"I suppose the French will issue an identical ultimatum within the hour."
As my job was now finished, I left and told those waiting outside, in 2 hours, a state of war will exist between England and Germany. Goering turned to me and said,
"If we lose this war, then may heaven have mercy on us."
Paul Otto Schmidt.
Berlin, September the 3rd, 1939. When Coulondre returned to the embassy, he was visibly shocked. Without a word, he sat down at the table of the large conference hall and reported the dramatic minutes in the Chancellery. He then paused for a moment, and suddenly this man burst into tears in front of us. Paul Stellin, Air Force attaché in the French Embassy in Berlin.
When France and Great Britain declared war on Germany on September the 3rd, people could hardly contain their happiness.
The mood, and not only in Warsaw, was enthusiastic. I immediately sent my sister, who had moved to London with her husband a few weeks earlier, a postcard. It certainly won't be easy, perhaps even terrible, but we are in good spirits because we don't have the slightest doubt that Germany will lose. The postcard never arrived. Marcel Reich Ranitsky, September 1939, unemployed in Warsaw.
War Diary, September the 3rd, 1939, Sunday. 9th day of mobilization. Declaration of war from England, 11:30 a.m. France, 5 p.m. Order for the transition to a war economy. Franz Halder, Chief of the Army General Staff.
We were woken up at 6 a.m. by a man in a dinghy banging on the side of our boat. "You guys English?" "Yes." "Well, lots of luck. You've just declared war on Germany." We never spoke a word, just went below and filled 2 teacups with warm gin. When we finally arrived at Catalina and joined the others, we found a somber group. Nobody knew quite what to do. Like millions all over the world, it was beginning to dawn on us that we were pawns in a game that had got out of control. David Niven, British Hollywood actor, Reminiscences.
Adolf Hitler accepts the world power's entry into the war because he considers himself infallible. The extraordinary success leading up to March 1939 has caused his self-confidence to become megalomania. In private discussions, he compares himself to Napoleon, Bismarck, and Frederick the Great.
Letter to Johanna Nossa, September the 3rd, 1939. We leave Berlin in a couple of hours. For me, this means going through thick and thin with the boss. I don't want to think about the fact that it may come to the ultimate, but if so, then my life will no longer have any value. Christa Schröder.
On September the 3rd, 1939, Great Britain and its Commonwealth dominions, Australia and New Zealand, and the Indian Empire declare war on the German Reich. The Union of South Africa follows on September the 6th, and Canada on September the 10th.
I remember the amazement when the message came in that Churchill was going to be appointed to the War Cabinet. Holding the ominous press dispatch in his hand, Goering stepped from the doorway to Hitler's living quarters and said wearily, "Churchill's in the cabinet. That means war really is about to begin." Albert Speer, Memoirs.
Churchill loves war. He makes no secret of it, even boasts about it. Joe L. Sawyer, bomber pilot, Royal Air Force.
Diary, Wednesday, September the 6th, 1939. We shall fight to the last and may win, but I confess I don't see how. Sir Alexander Cadogan, British Under-Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs.
War Diary, September the 13th, 1939. The Fuhrer's motorcade roared by. We saw our Fuhrer. He was going to the front. Gerhard M., soldier, Flensburg.
If a shot is fired from a house behind the front line, the house will be burned to the ground. If a shot is fired from a village behind the front and it can't be determined which house the shot came from, the entire village will be burned down. Fedor von Bock, commander of Army Group North, order of the day.
Diary, September the 25th, 1939.
Today I was combing my hair and a shaft of sunlight shone on my head, and I was shocked to see how dusty my hair was. I had no grey hairs in my glossy thatch, or very few before the war, but if I keep on like this, I'll be white by Christmas. Nella Last, housewife, Barrow-in-Furness, Lancashire.
Diary, September the 28th, 1939. Warsaw has finally fallen. Mountains of corpses have to be removed. The Russians are marching into Poland and are moving up to an agreed demarcation line. Scattered Polish divisions are leading a heroic, desperate struggle. Udo von Alvensleben, Captain, 16th Tank Division.
Some 16,000 members of the German armed forces die, and 30,000 are wounded in the Polish campaign of 1939. Sources report 68,000 dead and 130,000 wounded on the Polish side. Tens of thousands of Polish civilians are killed in the course of the 5-week conflict.
The next day in Warsaw, troops paraded in front of Hitler. The Lanchner brothers filmed him. I was standing near Hitler and saw how the troops looked at him, mesmerized. Without exception, they appeared ready to do anything for him. If he were to give the order, they would die for him. Leni Riefenstahl, director and actress.
In addition to the free city of Gdansk, western parts of Poland are annexed and added to the Greater German Reich. From October 16, 1939 onwards, the remaining central Poland is subject to the authority of a German civil administration as a general government. The successful combat troops are immediately transferred to the Western Front and replaced by occupation forces. These usually consist of older reservists who have served in the First World War. According to the Hitler-Stalin Pact, Eastern Poland falls to Russia. The German-descended families living there are relocated to Greater Poland. The landscape around the city of Posen, which is Reichsgau-Vaterland, is affiliated to the Greater German Reich.
A nation of 35 millions fell into the merciless grip of those who sought not only conquest, but enslavement, and indeed extinction for vast numbers. Winston Churchill, The Second World War.
Diary, October 12th, 1939. The guessing game begins. What's happening in the West? Several hundred kilometers behind the front line, people do not realize that there's a war going on. Friedrich Kellner, Laubach, Hessen.
Hard work. One has made one's mark in Germany when one is allowed to work late at the office. In part, the military qualities of the Germans are linked to their industriousness. One doesn't leave the war and go home at 6 p.m. Hans Habe, Hungarian-Austrian-American writer and newspaper publisher.